I worked hard, but my parents favored my sister. When they asked for money for her, I refused. My grandparents supported me and cut them off. I believed my parents were finally treating me properly since I had shown myself, but it turned out to be nothing more than a demand for their daughter and her 6 children from 3 consecutive marriages. I grew up knowing I was not the favorite child. My parents were always more concerned about my younger sister Emma, who seemed to have endless opportunities and support no matter how many times she made bad decisions. I grew accustomed to standing on my own 2 feet. I worked hard, paid for college with a combination of scholarships and part-time employment, and eventually found a steady, well-paying job. My parents were never impressed, despite the fact that I did everything on my own. For years, I attempted to brush it off and keep going, hoping that one day they'd admire me for being independent. Meanwhile, Emma's life was a roller coaster. She married young, and her first marriage dissolved after 2 years because her husband cheated. She remarried quickly and had 2 more children, but the marriage ended when her second husband developed a gambling addiction and lost their home. Emma was on her 3rd marriage at the time I started my job, and she had 6 children ranging in age from 12 to 2. Her current spouse works part-time as a delivery driver and is attempting to launch his own business, but they are struggling to make ends meet. My folks have always been there to assist her out, paying for items here and there and making excuses for why she needs a little extra support. For a while, I was too preoccupied with my own life to get caught up in Emma's drama, but then I saw a difference in how my parents regarded me. They became more attentive, reaching out more frequently, congratulating me on my profession, and inviting me over for family dinners. I wondered if they were finally proud of me. Part of me had been hoping for this for years, and I suppose I was willing to believe they were turning a corner. Last month, they invited me to supper. At first, everything seemed normal. We talked about work and caught up on tiny family stuff, and for a brief period, I felt like a member of the family in a way that I hadn't previously. But then the topic moved. They started talking about Emma, how difficult it was for her to raise 6 children on one salary, and how my parents had done everything they could to help but were running out of money. They went on to say how fortunate I was to have a decent job and a consistent salary, that I had no one relying on me, and that I was able to contribute back to the family. Then came the shocker. They expected me to step up and take care of Emma financially. They had a comprehensive plan. First, they asked me to buy her a new 5-bedroom house because her present rental was too small for a family of 8. They wanted me to set up college funds for all 6 of her children, which they argued was only fair given that I was the only one who could afford it. They wanted me to offer her a $5,000 monthly stipend to cover basic expenses as well as seed money to start her own mommy blog business. They planned to receive approximately $2 million up front, followed by continued funding. I sat there, absolutely stunned. They weren't asking for a minor favor. This was a lifelong commitment that regarded me as Emma's financial safety net. In that moment, I recognized that their recent compassion was not because they had finally accepted me as their son, but because they regarded me as a walking ATM for Emma. I informed them that, while I was willing to assist with minor bills or in the event of an emergency, I was not comfortable taking on such a large financial burden. At that point, the family conversation shifted completely. My mother began to cry, accusing me of abandoning the family when they needed me the most, and my father labeled me selfish and ungrateful. They stated I was revealing my true colors and that they were disappointed with who I had become. The dinner finished with them storming out. I believed that would be the end of it, but I was mistaken. Within hours, Emma began assaulting my phone with texts accusing me of jeopardizing her children's future. She even had her children send me messages like, "Uncle doesn't love us anymore." It was unbearable, so I blocked their phone numbers. After a while, I couldn't believe the situation had gotten this bad, all because I refused to fund my sister's life. The next day, my grandmother, my father's mother, called me unexpectedly. Apparently, my parents had been assuring the entire extended family that their successful son would take care of everything for Emma before they even asked me. They constructed an image for everyone of Emma moving into a big new house, of all her financial troubles being resolved, and of me being the one to provide her with everything she needed. Now that I'd declined, they were facing a big wave of embarrassment because the family had expected me to come through based on my parents' premature bragging. My grandparents were appalled when they learned the complete story. They'd always assumed Emma's lifestyle was sponsored by her different spouses, and that my parents helped out because they wanted to, rather than because they'd gone into debt to support her. They were so upset by my parents' behavior that they are now threatening to remove them from their will. They informed me that they would rather leave their estate to me and my relatives, who work hard and do not take advantage of people. As the situation spread around the family, I began to get messages from relatives offering their support. Some of them admitted they had no idea how much I had been dealing with on my own and apologized for not noticing it sooner. My aunt, my mother's sister, even contacted me and apologized for not realizing how differently I was treated growing up. The family dynamics were beginning to unravel, with everyone taking sides, and my parents were not handling it well. My phone started ringing nonstop again, this time with my parents exchanging angry, nasty messages and weeping voicemails. They were upset that I was damaging their family's reputation. They once left a message telling me that I was ruining Emma's children's life and that I would come to regret this decision someday. They'd then go back to imploring me to reconsider, saying things like, "We're family, and family helps each other." All of this has made me feel like a disaster. Part of me feels bad because I was trained to believe that family comes first, and it's difficult to break free of that conditioning. But another part of me is fatigued, thinking how long I've been trying to gain approval from people who just care about what benefits them. The knowledge stings, but I know that giving in now would result in years of financial and mental exhaustion, putting Emma's demands before of my own. Now I'm here on Reddit because I honestly don't know what to do next. Do I hold firm and maintain my limits because I know it's the best thing for me, or is there a compromise I'm not seeing? I could appreciate some unbiased counsel on this problem. Update 1. The situation with my parents and sister has deteriorated beyond my expectations. Just a few days after I told my grandparents the complete tale, they weren't lying about revising their will. They actually followed through, contacting their lawyer very immediately to ensure that my parents were removed from their inheritance. My grandparents had always been the quiet, keep the peace kind, so this wasn't just surprising, it was unprecedented in our family. However, it appears that my parents' years of favoritism toward Emma were the final straw. My grandparents also went above and beyond, convening a family meeting to clear the air. They planned it over the phone so that everyone, including myself, could attend, despite the fact that I live further away. They wanted everyone to grasp exactly what was going on, and based on what they implied, I had a hunch they were going to disclose stuff I had no idea about. The meeting was attended by a few aunts, uncles and cousins, basically, anyone close enough to be affected by this. When the conference began, my grandparents wasted no time. They instantly revealed that they had been paying large sums of money to my parents for the previous many years to aid both me and Emma with our education and future aspirations. They had given my parents more than $200,000 in all, with the expectation that it would be split evenly between Emma and me. I was speechless. I'd pushed my way through college on scholarships, student loans, and various part-time jobs, fighting to manage work and classes, whereas Emma seemed to live on another planet, scarcely lifting a finger and continually being bailed out of every bad decision. All those years, I'd been doing everything on my own while my grandparents sent money that I never received. My grandparents were infuriated. They had expected the money would benefit both of us, but now that they see how my parents had spent it, they feel absolutely deceived. They'd made it clear to my parents that they wished to support both of us, but it turned out that the money had primarily gone to Emma, covering her failed marriages, rent payments, and who knows what else. They requested that my parents provide a thorough accounting of how every dollar had been spent, threatening to bring attorneys if they did not comply. For a family as secretive as ours, this was an unimaginable step, but I could see they'd been tested. In addition, my grandparents indicated that they would establish trust funds for each of their grandkids, including Emma's 6 children. However, they made it clear that the money would be carefully handled by an independent trustee and could only be used for certain purposes, such as education or healthcare. They made it clear that they did not want my parents or Emma to have access to these funds, which was a big relief. At the very least, I knew Emma's children would have a chance at a solid future without my parents depleting those accounts for other purposes. Everything exploded following the family meeting. As they began to put the pieces together, relatives began to contact me one by one. Apparently, this wasn't the first time my parents had taken money from family members in the name of assisting the kids or funding family emergencies. An aunt told me that after Emma's second marriage failed, she loaned my parents a few $1,000s, believing it was for emergency expenses. Another cousin recalls my parents asking for money around the time I went to college, claiming it was to assist me get started, but I never saw any of it. Some of them were furious, believing they had been misled about where their money had gone. Others were simply unhappy, stating they had not known how much my parents valued Emma over me. One of my cousins even showed me screenshots of discussions with my parents after I graduated from college. They had actually discouraged family from attending my graduation, stating that I wanted to keep it small and avoid a major fuss. Meanwhile, I was hoping that my family would come and celebrate with me. It felt like a gut punch to realize how much they'd consciously sought to downplay my accomplishments while continually going all in for Emma. What astonished me the most was Emma herself reaching out to me. She sent a couple long emails, each with a unique tone. In one, she tried to seem as if she had always backed me, saying how she had never known our parents' bias toward her and how she had always assumed we were close. In another, she portrayed herself as a victim of our parents' manipulation, claiming that they had blinded her to the truth about our family dynamics. But what jumped out in each communication was that she always managed to include a request for assistance during this tough period. She tried to behave as if we were now best friends, but it was evident she still wanted me to open my wallet for her. It was difficult to believe. Even after my grandparents took such severe measures to put things right, and despite the family outrage, Emma still managed to make it all about her and what she could get from me. I felt like I was seeing the same narrative over and over. She couldn't seem to grasp the concept of limits or the fact that I was tired of being a constant source of comfort. I was determined not to allow her to manipulate me back into that role. While everything was going on, my folks were busy with their own campaign. They inundated me with voicemails that ranged from violent rants to emotional appeals. In one message, my mother accused me of pulling the family apart, claiming I would regret it one day when I discovered how much I had harmed everyone. My father would then ask me to reconsider, saying we could work things out quietly and it didn't have to be such a huge deal. They even tried to guilt-trip me, telling me that I was placing my grandparents in an unpleasant situation and that I should consider how they would feel if the family divided as a result of all this. But their tactics were ineffective. My grandparents were behind me, and the rest of the family could see my parents' true colors. Some of them even contacted out to say they were proud of me for staying firm. My aunt contacted me in tears, apologizing for not noticing how differently my parents had treated me throughout the years. She said she'd always imagined I was more self-sufficient and didn't require as much assistance, but now she realized I'd been forced into that role because my parents had focused so much on Emma. As the family began to understand what I had been going through, more people came out with apologies or anecdotes about things they had noticed over the years. It was bittersweet. Part of me was relieved that the truth was finally being revealed, that others were acknowledging the sacrifices I had made on my own, but another part of me felt as if I was reliving years of pain and disappointment. All those times I felt invisible, all those times I questioned why my accomplishments didn't seem to matter so much, it all made sense suddenly. However, it did not erase the years of feeling like I was second best. The aftermath of this has been draining. My parents continue to refuse to accept responsibility for any of it. They're so concerned with the family's reputation that they can't see the damage they've done to it. This is just another disagreement that I should drop for the sake of peace, and they are trying to keep the entire thing under wraps. But I no longer feel bad for standing up for myself. I guess I'm finally seeing how crucial it is to create limits, especially with family. If I give in now, it will only mean more years of being used and taken for granted. For the first time, I feel in control of my own life. My grandparents have informed me that if my parents take this any further, they would deal with it. They've made it clear that they don't want me to feel pressured, and they've even informed me that if my parents continue to stir things up, they'll take further precautions to safeguard me. Just knowing I don't have to go through this alone has made a huge impact. Now I'm left wondering what family means at this point. All these years, I believed that being a good son and brother entailed putting everyone else first, sacrificing my own needs to ensure that everyone else was okay. But now I understand that there is a limit, and family isn't supposed to treat you like an ATM or overlook your own happiness simply because it's convenient. As things continue to unfold, I remain steadfast in my decision, but a part of me wonders if I should be doing more or approaching this differently. I'd greatly appreciate any suggestions on how to proceed. There is still so much to comprehend, and I'm trying to take it one day at a time. Update 2. My parents broke their quiet just a few days after my grandparents made their major news about the will. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging they may have gone too far, they sent a lengthy, meticulously crafted email attempting to justify every decision they had ever taken. They didn't just defend Emma, they virtually praised it, describing it as an investment because Emma had always been more family-oriented. Meanwhile, I was classified as self-sufficient and career-oriented, which they assumed indicated I didn't require as much assistance. They went on to clarify that their call for me to step in and fund Emma's life had nothing to do with money. They regarded it as even things out, giving Emma the same advantages they believed I had on my own. To add salt to the wound, they called me selfish for refusing to share my surplus wealth with my family. The email wasn't just words either. They sent a list of everything they claimed to have spent on me versus Emma. I'm talking about everything, including Emma's basic needs such as food, clothing, and housing. They mentioned her wedding expenses, property payments, and even post-divorce therapy. They even mentioned Emma's emotional assistance during her adolescent years, valuing and quantifying it. It was so ridiculous that I recognized they'd been thinking about it for a long time, most likely intending to hurl it back at me. They apparently shared this email with the entire extended family as well, aiming to present me as the selfish one. But it completely backfired. Relatives who had previously remained neutral began contacting me, appalled by what they viewed as an outlandish attempt to tax me for fundamental parenting. Some even apologized for not comprehending the kind of partiality I was dealing with. I believe my parents expected people to gather around them, but all they did was push everyone further away. In addition to this, my grandparents' lawyer became involved. My grandparents had always expected that any money they had given my parents over the years would be divided between me and Emma for our education and other essential costs. They soon discovered that the money had been spent on Emma's marriages and unsuccessful relationships. The lawyer wrote an official letter to my parents asking a thorough accounting of where the money had gone. My grandparents were prepared to take this to court if necessary, and I don't blame them. They felt betrayed, and so did I. It was like a tangled web of deception that had been growing for years, with me on the sidelines the entire time. In a strange twist, Emma's first ex-husband contacted me. He is the father of her two oldest children, and while we had never been close, we had remained civil. He told me that he had heard about everything and wanted to express his perspective. He confessed that when Emma became pregnant, my parents coerced him into marrying her, promising financial support as long as he followed through with the marriage. I knew they married quickly, but I had no idea my parents were that involved. Apparently, the majority of the support my parents had provided came from money they had received from my grandparents, money my grandparents had assumed was going toward Emma's and my futures. Emma's ex even apologized, claiming he regretted not standing up to them and allowing the situation to get out of control. My parents quickly noticed the email wasn't having the desired effect, so they tried to backtrack. They wrote a follow-up reply to everyone, explaining that the previous email was sent in rage and should not be taken seriously. But it was difficult to believe that reason given that their email had clearly been planned for some time. They could have printed and dispatched it as an official document, given how detailed it was. Trying to take it back now simply made them appear worse, and no one bought it. Emma had been silent for a few days following the family meeting, but she began reaching out again. Her tone had changed from guilt-tripping to more urgent. She sent a few emails, implying that she had always loved me and had no idea our parents treated us so differently. She even tried to justify her condition, stating she didn't want to burden me but was in a terrible situation with her children. Her texts became stranger, swinging between sentimental memories from childhood and reminders of how difficult life was for her with 6 children and a suffering husband. At one point, she mentioned her husband's economic difficulties and implied that her children were struggling in school due to the stress at home. It was difficult not to feel awful for Emma and her children, but I also couldn't ignore what had happened. She had known about our parents' fondness for years and took advantage of it, leaving me to fend for myself. She wanted me to come in and help her now that she was struggling. Her communications made me feel sad rather than outraged. She was my sister, and her children were completely innocent in all of this, but it was not my obligation to save her from a predicament she had helped create. More family members began sharing their stories. One of my aunts contacted me, apologizing for never saying anything when she observed things weren't fair between Emma and me. She remembered times when my parents plainly preferred Emma and ignored me, but she didn't want to get involved at the time. She also revealed that she had volunteered to help me with my college applications, but my parents declined, claiming that I had everything under control. In actuality, I was managing everything on my own, including school applications and work. My aunt admitted that she had no idea how much I had been left to manage on my own, and she felt bad for not intervening sooner. Family group chats reached a whole new level of awkwardness. Relatives began reaching out, asking if I needed anything or if they could help in any way. It was unusual to suddenly have so many people offering help and sympathy, especially because they'd never been so active in my life before. I loved their goodwill, but it became overpowering. Part of me felt like I shouldn't need their help right now. I'd already gone through the most difficult sections on my own. I mostly thanked them, wondering what else to say. Even my parents' closest friends started to distance themselves. A few people accepted their version of the story, that I was a workaholic who did not prioritize family. But after reading the email and hearing additional information, they began to see through my parents' explanations. Some even apologized, admitting they were wrong to judge me. One of them even indicated that my parents had borrowed money from them, citing family needs. They had assumed it was for necessary costs, but now they were wondering if they had been subsidizing Emma's lifestyle. Despite everything, my parents continued to push. They kept sending messages, arguing that I owed them for everything they'd done for me, that I was responsible for keeping the family together, and that my failure to support Emma was causing the family to fall apart. They claimed I was wrecking everything, damaging their reputation, and endangering Emma's children. It was frustrating because they were ignoring their own acts and pretended that none of this was their fault. For the time being, I'm not backing down. I refuse to be guilted into correcting problems that my parents caused, or to accept responsibility for Emma's decisions. It's still difficult to believe this is my family, that things have gotten to the point where I have to choose between my own well-being and what they call family loyalty. It's a lot to process, and I honestly don't know what the future holds, but for the first time, I feel like I'm standing up for myself and finally being heard. That is, at the very least, a positive step forward. Update 3. The situation has reached an unexpected conclusion. After all of the chaos and hidden issues that had surfaced, my grandparents decided to take a tough stance. They scheduled a final family gathering, this time with their lawyer present. It felt as if a chapter was coming to an end, but there were still so many wounds and unresolved feelings in the air. However, this wasn't simply talk. My grandparents had a plan, and they were not going to waste any more time. They claimed that they had not only revised their will, but were also taking quick action with their assets to avoid further abuse. For years, my parents had been living rent-free in a family-owned holiday home. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, but my parents made it their permanent home, expecting it to be passed down to them. But that's over. My grandparents are selling the land and intend to use the funds to establish educational trusts for all of their great-grandchildren. This includes Emma's and my cousin's children. My grandparents also implemented a reorganization strategy to ensure that no more funds were diverted accidentally. They are establishing annual educational grants for any family members pursuing higher education or professional credentials. However, these monies will be administered by an impartial trustee, with no family members participating. My folks were noticeably shaken upon hearing this. Losing the free lodging was terrible enough, but the realization that they would no longer have access to my grandparents' land was a rude awakening. For once, they didn't argue, or at least realized it wouldn't help. They simply looked defeated, which was unusual for my parents given their years of pride and control. My grandparents gave them 60 days to leave the land, with no extensions. The lawyer handed them a signed document, and my parents had no choice but to comply. In a stunning turn of events, my parents admitted to certain financial errors concerning school monies supplied by my grandparents years ago. This was a tremendous revelation, and many family members were shocked. With few options left, my parents signed a formal repayment agreement. Even though I'm sure it would be difficult for them, after they leave the property, they will have to move into a small apartment and severely reduce their lifestyle. It's evident that this is a significant adjustment for them. They've lived well on family assistance for so long that I doubt they ever expected to have to budget or downsize. Meanwhile, Emma appears to have accepted the reality of the situation. Her support system is basically collapsing around her. My parents' free support is no longer available, and she can no longer rely on them to pay her expenses or bail her out if her husband's business initiatives fail. Instead of moaning or trying to guilt-trip me, she is now taking efforts to improve her own situation. She's enrolled in a vocational program for medical billing and coding, which should provide her with a consistent income and the opportunity to raise her children on her own terms. Her spouse has taken on more hours at his delivery job and appears to be making an attempt to contribute to the family's costs. Emma even sent me an email, not asking for money, but simply requesting assistance with her resume. I decided to check into it, assuming it was a little way to help without encouraging her dependence. Hearing from Emma's children has been one of the most shocking and pleasant developments. They contacted me through Emma's father, her first ex-husband. Apparently, my grandparents had planned for them to attend family therapy sessions. They'd been dealing with a lot of confusion about family dynamics and had been caught up in so much drama. Now, with the help of a therapist, they're starting to comprehend the intricate relationships and favoritism they've grown up in. The elder kids apologized for the guilt-tripping messages they had delivered when everything initially began. They said they didn't realize how much pressure their mother was placing on me, and they felt horrible about being used as pawns. I promised them everything was okay and that none of this was their fault. They were just kids, after all, and they were simply following their mother's instructions. I'm confident that treatment will help kids learn that they are not responsible for resolving the conflict amongst the adults in their lives. My parents appear to be adjusting to their new situation, but they are having difficulty totally accepting it. In one final attempt to rewrite the narrative, they began sending me random photos from my childhood, each with captions like, "Remember when we were a happy family," and "Don't forget who's been there since the beginning." I'm not sure if they're genuinely trying to make amends or if it's just another ploy to play on my emotions. Some texts describe how much they suffered to raise me, while others depict them as victims abandoned by everyone they cared about. They've also been telling anyone who will listen that the family has turned against them, presenting the situation as if they were innocent victims simply trying to help Emma. But I believe most of the family has seen through it by now. They maintain their distance, and their interactions are now courteous but distant. As for me, the entire experience has been eye-opening. I had no idea how far the favoritism extended or how much my family had been exploited over the years. My grandparents have been great throughout this process, demonstrating strength and justice that I had never appreciated before. They're taking on the role of champions for the future generation, ensuring that nothing like what happened to me and Emma happens again. The entire process has been a challenging but essential reality check. It has revealed me who actually cares about me and who only sees me as a source of financial assistance. Finally, I want to thank everyone who has supported me. Thank you and farewell. My boyfriend and I just had a baby when his ex-mother-in-law suddenly claimed the child was her grandchild, causing chaos at the hospital. Okay, Reddit, I really need some advice. I'm 29 years old, and my 30-year-old partner Mark and I just welcomed our daughter Lily 2 weeks ago. Lily is incredible, healthy, and the utter joy of our lives. Getting here, however, has been a daytime soap opera-worthy drama, and it all boils down to two really tough mothers, my ex-mother-in-law and Mark's mother. To comprehend the current situation, I need to give you some background. I was previously married, however briefly. I met my ex-husband David, 31 million, when I was 22. We were young, impetuous, and believed we were madly in love. We got married after roughly 8 months of dating. It was a fiasco nearly from the beginning. We were simply fundamentally incompatible. We disagreed about everything, from how to load the dishwasher, really, to our long-term objectives. He wanted to stay in our small hometown forever, purchase a house with a white picket fence, and start having children right away. In my late 20s, I wanted to focus on my job and perhaps consider having children. We had been married for a little more than a year before we recognized it was a mistake. There was no dramatic outburst, no infidelity, just a quiet, agonizing awareness that we were making each other unhappy. We chose to divorce. It was unexpectedly amicable. We didn't detest each other, we simply realized we were better off apart. We did not have any shared assets or children, so the legal process was relatively simple. My parents were supportive. They were never major fans of David. They felt he was dull, to be honest, and all they wanted was for me to be happy. But David's mother was quite different. Let us call her Susan. She is the type of lady who has her entire life planned out, and she wants everyone around her to follow suit, whether they want it or not. She is also profoundly devout, believing that divorce is a sin regardless of the circumstances. Susan had an image of David and me as the ideal conventional couple. She was distraught when we broke up. She tried everything to convince us to work things out, including guilt trips, tearful phone calls, and even an unannounced visit to my apartment with a marriage counselor. It was quite awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be courteous and considerate, but I needed to be firm. I told her that while I appreciated her concern, the choice was final. The divorce was settled approximately 7 years ago. I relocated to a different city, found a terrific job, and began a completely new life. I severed off touch with David and Susan. It was not out of malice, it was simply essential for me to move on. We were not social media pals, and we had no shared friends, so it was a clean break. Then, around 1.5 years ago, I met Mark. We met during a work conference. We started conversing during a coffee break and instantly clicked. He was humorous, smart, and kind, and we shared a love of travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers and began dating shortly after. Mark knew about my prior marriage from the start. It was not a secret. I told him the whole tale on our second date, and he was unconcerned. He claimed it was in the past, and it didn't change his feelings about me. He'd been in a couple long-term relationships before, so he knew that not everything works out. We fell in love instantly. It was different from my relationship with David. Mark made it feel effortless, natural, and exciting. We had a lot in common and really loved each other's company. Around 6 months into our relationship, I met Mark's parents. His father, John, is the loveliest, most laid-back person you will ever meet. He greeted me warmly and made me feel right at home. Mark's mother, Carol, had a different narrative. Carol is complex. She is highly polished, very proper, and very opinionated. She's also quite attached to Mark, her only child. From the time I met her, I could tell she was assessing me and finding flaws in me. She was cordial, but there was a noticeable coolness in the air. She made a few subtle digs at my divorce, nothing overtly nasty, but things like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting." Or, "I always believe that marriage is forever, no matter what." She also stated that she anticipated Mark to settle down and have a typical family, just as Susan had wished for David. I attempted to brush it off. I assumed she was simply protective of her son, and I hoped she'd warm up to me gradually. But she never actually did. She was always nice, but never truly friendly. She'd ask me questions about my profession and my family, but it felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Then, around 8 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant. It was a nice surprise. Mark and I had talked about having kids in the future, but we weren't actively trying. We were both excited though. We chose not to marry immediately away. I'd already been through one hasty wedding and didn't want to go through it again. I wanted to be sure that we were getting married for the right reasons, not just because we were expecting a child. Mark fully understood and supported my decision. We informed our family. My parents were overjoyed. They had always wanted grandchildren. John was equally excited. He began talking about building a treehouse and teaching the infant to fish. Carol, as one could expect, was unhappy. She didn't say anything directly unpleasant, but her displeasure was obvious. She continued saying things like, "Well, I suppose it's not the traditional way to do things." And, "I just hope you're both prepared for the challenges of parenthood." She also began implying strongly that we should marry before the kid arrived. The pregnancy itself went relatively smoothly. I had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but overall I felt fine. Mark was quite supportive. He attended all of my doctor's appointments, read all of the baby books, and even began learning to cook, which was a little miracle. Throughout the pregnancy, Carol was a source of stress. She'd contact me on a regular basis, purportedly to check in, but the calls were always more like lectures. She would advise me what I should eat, how much I should exercise, and which parenting books I should read. She even sent me a list of recommended baby names, all of which were quite outdated and stuffy. I tried to be patient and understanding. I understood she was simply trying to help in her own way, but it was exhausting. I felt as though I was constantly being scrutinized and chastised. Then, approximately a month before my due date, something totally unexpected occurred. I received a text message from an unfamiliar phone number. The message went, "Is this OP? It's Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart sank. I hadn't communicated with Susan in years. Why is she approaching me now? And what did she mean by "it's about the baby"? I showed Mark the text. He was just as perplexed as I was. We decided that I should contact her back and see what was going on. I called Susan, and she instantly answered. She sounded frantic. She responded, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's." I was speechless. I honestly could not understand what she was saying. "What? Susan, that's impossible. I haven't seen David in years." She mentioned that she saw a photo of me on social media. Apparently, one of my distant relatives had tagged me in a photo, and I was obviously pregnant. She'd done some research, which I'm pretty sure included researching my online profiles, and determined that the timing was suitable. She was sure that I had secretly reconciled with David and that this baby was his. I tried to politely convey to her that she was entirely wrong. I informed her about Mark and how long we had been together, but she would not listen. She insisted that I was lying and that I should come clean for the sake of the baby. The chat concluded with her threatening to show up at the hospital if I went into labor. I hung up the phone, thoroughly shaken and confused. I told Mark everything. He was infuriated. He couldn't believe Susan had accused me of something so absurd. He wanted to call her and tell her what was on his mind, but I urged him not to. I did not want to exacerbate the matter. We decided to ignore Susan and hope she'd come to her senses. We assumed she was simply grabbing at straws, eager for her son to have a child. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. After a long and arduous labor, our beautiful daughter Lily was born. Mark was with me the whole time, and he was incredible. We were in the recovery room, fatigued but elated, when there was a ruckus outside the door. Susan burst into the room, followed by a confused-looking security guard. She began to scream, "That's my grandchild. I know it. You need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was a total nightmare. I was still in recovery from childbirth. I was hormonal, and I felt completely humiliated. Mark intervened and told Susan to go, but she refused. It required 2 security personnel to forcibly remove her from the room. The entire situation was quite disturbing. I was furious with Susan. When we returned home from the hospital, I decided to phone David. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I felt compelled to clear the air and ensure he understood what his mother had done. He answered the phone, clearly astonished to hear from me. I explained the scenario, and he was shocked. He apologized profusely for his mother's actions. He said that he had been dating a new woman, Serene. Serene and I have a similar first name, but not precisely the same. Imagine my name is Serena, and hers is Serene. Similar, but not the same. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mother. Susan was fascinated with him remarrying and having children, and he didn't want to deal with her expectations. Susan had apparently overheard David's phone conversation with Serene around a month ago. She misheard the name and assumed he uttered my name. She assumed right away that David and I had reconciled. David, being a bit of a coward, his words, not mine, had not corrected her. He reasoned that it was better to let her think whatever she wanted than to cope with her reaction to his new connection. He explained that I intended to keep things quiet, which is why she had not heard from me. Susan's sister was also in the hospital for a routine appointment on the day I went into labor. She'd only met me a few times years ago, but she was aware of Susan's preoccupation with me and David. When she saw me, very pregnant, being brought to labor and delivery, she immediately contacted Susan. Susan ended up at my hospital room, thinking that I was carrying her grandson. David apologized profusely. He claimed he was an idiot who should have told his mother the truth a long time ago. He also told me that he tried to speak with his mother, but she refused to believe him. She was convinced he was only covering for me. He stated he and Susan were moving to another state to be closer to Serene, so I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated his apology, but what he and his mother had done was extremely devastating. I told him I didn't want to speak with him or Susan again. Mark was listening to the entire exchange. He was infuriated. He claimed he couldn't believe David and Susan had been so selfish and irresponsible. It established that I wasn't crazy, but it didn't address the larger issue, Carol. Mark informed his parents about the incident in the hospital. Of course, John was outraged. He could not believe Susan would do something so outrageous. Carol, on the other hand, remained unusually quiet. She did not defend Susan, and she did not criticize her either. She simply stated, "Well, it's certainly a complicated situation." A few days later, Carol came to see us. She brought a gift for Lily, a really costly baby blanket that was completely not my style. She held Lily for a few minutes, fawning over her, and then got down to business. She went on. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation, and I think for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if you got a paternity test." I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was making that suggestion. Mark glanced at me, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and remorse. He responded, "Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust OP completely. This is ridiculous." Carol did not back down. She responded, "It's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's?" I eventually spoke up. I corrected myself. "Carol, I can assure you this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we met. This is insulting." She fixed me with a harsh, hard stare. "I'm just trying to protect my son," she explained. "I'm sure you understand." The conversation deteriorated from there. It ended with Mark telling his mother that he would not even contemplate a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect his relationship with me, she wasn't welcome in our family. She stormed out, and we haven't heard from her again. Mark tried calling her several times, but she would not answer. John has phoned Mark, and he is really furious about the situation. He's caught in the center and doesn't know what to do. So, Reddit, here I am. I'm a new mom navigating the responsibilities of parenting while simultaneously dealing with this terrible family drama. I'm upset and angry that Carol would question my honesty and Mark's paternity. I'm also concerned about the long-term influence on Mark's connection with his mother. I informed Carol that if she wanted to continue pressing the DNA test issue, she could kick rocks. I didn't say those exact words, I was more polite, but the message was clear. I told her that if she couldn't accept Lily as Mark's daughter without proof, she didn't have to be a member of our family. Aita? I want Mark to have a relationship with his mother, but I also refuse to be treated so disrespectfully. And I certainly do not want my daughter to grow up with someone who doubts her parentage. Any tips or recommendations will be considered. Update 1. Wow. I did not anticipate this post to get that viral. Thank you to everyone for their encouragement and wisdom. It's been quite reassuring to learn that I'm not crazy, and that Carol's behavior is utterly out of character. Many of you suggested that I talk to Mark about having clear boundaries with his mother, and you are completely correct. I had been postponing the talk because I was fatigued and did not want to deal with any more turmoil, but it had to happen. So, last night, after Lily was sleeping, Mark and I had a long conversation. Carol's demand for a paternity test wounded and disrespected me, and I told him so. I also expressed concern about the damage this was having on his relationship with his father John. Mark absolutely understood. He stated that he was furious with his mother, not only for the paternity test request, but also for her behavior throughout my pregnancy. He explained that he had been making excuses for her for years, but he was finally seeing her for who she truly is, a controlling, manipulative woman who is more concerned with her personal image than her son's pleasure. He told me he tried contacting her again, but she still did not answer. He left her a voicemail in which he expressed his disappointment with her and stated that he would not contact her again unless she apologized to me and accepted Lily as his daughter, no questions asked. He also mentioned he had spoken with John again. John is heartbroken by the circumstances. He adores Carol, but he also understands that she is in the wrong. He told Mark that he was thinking of staying with us for a while to get away from Carol and spend more time with Lily. Mark and I agreed to welcome John with open arms. We have an extra bedroom and Lily adores him. It would be wonderful to have his assistance, and it would also provide him with a reprieve from his toxic home situation. Some of you questioned my parents and why they weren't more involved. That's a valid question, and I should have addressed it in the original piece. My folks live fairly far away, on the opposite side of the country, actually. They are likewise in their late 50s and not in good health. Traveling vast distances is quite difficult for them, especially given the current constraints and worries. We communicate to them on video calls virtually every day, and they adore Lily even from a distance. They are really supportive of me and Mark, and they were outraged when I told them about Susan's outburst in the hospital and Carol's subsequent behavior. They wish they could aid, but they are physically unable to do so. They send their love and support, which means everything to me. They also stated that if John needed a place to crash, they would gladly contribute some money and urged me to find him a suitable retirement home. It was quite sweet of them. So that's where things are right now. Carol is still giving us the quiet treatment. John is considering moving in with us. Mark and I are attempting to concentrate on being parents to our wonderful little girl. I'm no longer attempting to placate Carol or avoid her sentiments. I'm prioritizing my family, which is what matters most. I will keep you informed of any additional developments. Thank you for your continued support. Update 2, things have intensified. John arrived to stay with us a few days ago. He arrived with a small luggage and a very sorrowful attitude. He explained that Carol had rarely spoken to him since Mark's last phone contact. She was cold and distant, and he couldn't take it anymore. He spent the first day largely snuggling Lily and talking with Mark. He seemed relieved to be free of the stress and negativity. He kept emphasizing how much he loved Lily and was happy for the opportunity to spend time with her. Carol then showed up uninvited at our door yesterday. I was in the nursery, feeding Lily, when the doorbell rang. Mark responded, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and strident. When I entered the living room, I noticed a tight atmosphere. Carol stood in the doorway, enraged. John sat on the couch, looking defeated. Mark was standing between them with his arms crossed. Carol requested that John return home immediately. She complained that he was being foolish and was humiliating her. She accused me of manipulating him and using him against her. John attempted to speak, but Carol stifled him. She just kept shouting and raving, accusing me of various things. Mark finally had enough. He informed Carol unequivocally that she needed to leave. He stated that she was not welcome in our home unless she apologized to me and embraced Lily without reservation. Carol appeared shocked. She obviously wasn't used to Mark standing up to her. She stuttered for a while before turning on her heels and storming out, slamming the door behind her. The whole situation was quite stressful. I felt terrible for John. He seemed lost and confused. He continually apologized to me, even though he had done nothing wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he could stay with us as long as he needed. We told him we loved him and were glad we had him. After John had gone to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's actions were totally wrong. We determined that we needed to establish even stricter boundaries. Mark texted Carol that we would be in no communication until she sought professional help for her controlling conduct and apologized to both me and John. He said that we loved her, but we couldn't let her continue to insult us and ruin our lives. It's been a few days since we've heard from her. I am not sure what to expect. Update 3. It had been roughly a week since Carol's dramatic visit. We haven't heard anything from her, no calls, texts, angry emails, nothing. John, on the other hand, has settled in well. He's a big help to Lily, and he obviously enjoys spending time with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her on walks in the stroller. It is heartwarming to watch. He's also become more candid about his marriage. He told Mark and me that he has been unhappy for years. He claimed that Carol has always been controlling, but it has gotten worse over time. He feels that he's lost himself in the relationship and has been going through the motions. He began attending a therapist, which Mark and I encouraged. He believes it's helping him process his emotions and figure out what he wants for the future. He isn't sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she apologizes. He claims he needs to think about what is best for him for once. Mark totally supports his father, whatever he decides. He's just thrilled John's finally sticking up for himself. As for me, I'm attempting to concentrate on Lily and on building a quiet, loving environment for our family. I'm still upset and outraged over Carol's actions, but I'm trying not to let them consume me. I've started thinking about returning to work part-time. My maternity leave is nearly over, and I miss using my abilities. Mark is entirely on board, and John has offered to assist with childcare. We are also starting to arrange Lily's first birthday party. The party will be modest and exclusive, with only close relatives and friends. Obviously, Carol will not be invited. It's strange to consider celebrating a huge milestone without Mark's mother present, but I just don't see any other option. She made her decision, and she must deal with the consequences. I'm still hopeful that one day she'll see reason and apologize, but I'm not holding my breath. Update 4. A few tiny but major events have occurred. First, John applied for legal separation from Carol. He spoke with a lawyer and determined that it was the best course of action, at least for now. He explained that he needed to create some formal gap between them. He informed Carol of his decision, and she did not take it well. She called Mark, yelling and crying, accusing him of turning his father against her. Mark stayed calm, telling her that John had made his own decision and she should respect it. After a few days, we received a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, requesting that we stop disseminating false and defamatory material about her. Apparently, she claims that we have been telling others that she is mentally ill and a lousy grandma. It's utterly ludicrous, of course. We haven't discussed her with anyone other than John's therapist, which is strictly secret. We're fairly certain she's just attempting to bully and scare us into backing down. Mark consulted his own lawyer, who urged us to disregard the letter. He claimed it was unfounded and Carol had no legal basis to stand on. So, that is where we are. John is legally separated from Carol, and we are facing a ridiculous legal threat. It's all quite stressful, but we're trying to remain strong and unified. On a more positive note, Lily is flourishing. She's growing and maturing so quickly. She began babbling and smiling continuously. She is the most lovely little child, and she brings so much happiness into our life.
Am I the A for abandoning my boyfriend after he went through a severe health crisis and his child was diagnosed with HIV? I am Ellen, a 53-year-old woman who has seen a fair share of life's ups and downs. My story intertwines with Richard's, a 62-year-old man whose presence in my life brought both joy and complexity. Our paths crossed in the spring of 2005, at a charity event that neither of us had any real interest in attending but did so out of a sense of duty. It was one of those evenings filled with polite conversations and superficial exchanges, the kind that leaves one wondering why they bothered to attend. Amidst the mundane chatter and clinking of wine glasses, Richard and I found ourselves repeatedly reaching for the same appetizers at the buffet table. What started as light-hearted banter over the shrimp cocktail turned into a deeper conversation. Richard's laugh was hearty and infectious, and it drew me in. His hair, a mix of black and gray, framed a face that seemed to carry both wisdom and weariness. There was something comforting about his presence, something genuine in a room full of pretense. Our initial connection was rooted in shared interests. We both had a deep appreciation for jazz and a love for classic films. Our dates often involved long walks through the park, where we'd talk about everything from the nuances of a Miles Davis track to the intricate storytelling in Fellini's films. Richard was a widower who spoke of his late wife with a tenderness that resonated with me. It was clear that he had loved deeply and lost profoundly, a fact that made him all the more endearing to me. I had been divorced for over a decade by then, and while the scars from that relationship had mostly healed, they left behind a cautious heart. My marriage had ended in a painful and drawn-out process, filled with emotional upheavals and legal battles that took their toll on me. The experience had made me wary of opening up to anyone again. I had built walls around my heart, convinced that vulnerability would only lead to more pain. Trusting someone else seemed like an insurmountable risk, and I had resigned myself to a life of solitude, finding solace in my independence and self-reliance. When I met Richard, I was not looking for love. In fact, I was content with my single life, focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my close-knit group of friends. Richard, however, had a way of gently easing into my life, his presence unassuming yet steadily becoming a fixture. He understood loss in a way that resonated with me deeply. As a widower, he had faced his own profound grief and loneliness, and this shared understanding of loss became a foundation for our connection. Richard's approach to our budding relationship was marked by patience and kindness. He never rushed me or pushed for more than I was ready to give. Instead, he offered a steady, reassuring presence that slowly chipped away at my reservations. His gentle demeanor and the genuine warmth he showed me began to erode the walls I had built around my heart. Our early days together were filled with simple, quiet moments that brought us closer. We spent long afternoons walking in the park, sharing stories about our pasts, our hopes, and our fears. Richard had a knack for making me laugh, his sense of humor lightening the heaviness that sometimes weighed on my spirit. We discovered a shared love for jazz and classic films, spending evenings listening to records or watching old movies. These shared interests created a sense of companionship that felt both comforting and natural. Richard's empathy and understanding played a crucial role in building my trust. He never dismissed my past or the pain I had endured. Instead, he listened, offering support without judgment. When I spoke about my divorce, the betrayal, and the heartache, he would hold my hand, his presence a silent assurance that he was there for me. This empathy made it easier for me to open up, to let go of some of the fears that had held me back. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, our relationship grew stronger. We found comfort in each other's company, creating a rhythm that felt right. Richard's understanding of my need for space and his respect for my boundaries made all the difference. He knew when to give me room and when to offer a comforting embrace. This balance allowed our bond to deepen in a way that felt safe and secure. Our companionship became a source of strength for both of us. For Richard, I provided a new chapter of connection and care after the loss of his wife. For me, Richard became a partner who understood my cautious heart and honored it. Together, we navigated the complexities of our pasts, finding joy in the present and hope for the future. Richard's consistent kindness and our shared moments of joy slowly healed the lingering wounds from my previous relationship. I found myself looking forward to our time together, feeling a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in years. The cautious heart that once dominated my emotions began to soften, replaced by a growing love and trust for Richard. However, Richard's health was always a looming concern. He had chronic health issues, including hypertension and diabetes, which required careful management. Despite this, I was ready to stand by him, prepared to face whatever challenges came our way. My love for him was deep and unwavering, and I envisioned a future where we could navigate his health concerns together, offering each other support and companionship. In the early years of my relationship with Richard, our bond grew strong, nourished by shared interests and mutual understanding. Richard, at 62, had already faced significant health challenges, including hypertension and diabetes. Despite these issues, his zest for life was infectious, and it was this enthusiasm that drew me to him. At 53, I was acutely aware of the potential difficulties that lay ahead, but my commitment to Richard was unwavering. As time went on, the topic of marriage naturally arose. For me, marriage symbolized a formal commitment, a way to legally and publicly affirm the bond we shared. I imagined a future where we would navigate life's challenges together, with the security that marriage provides. Richard, however, had a different perspective. Having been through a bitter divorce, he was hesitant to remarry. His primary concern was to ensure that his estate would go to his children without any complications. He believed that our love did not need a legal stamp to validate it. I understood Richard's concerns and respected his desire to prioritize his children's inheritance. However, I also needed to protect my own interests. I made it clear that while I was willing to support him and stand by his side, I would not make the same sacrifices a wife might without the legal acknowledgement of marriage. This was not about mistrust but about ensuring that my contributions and sacrifices were recognized and valued. During one of our more serious conversations about the future, I proposed a compromise. I suggested that he make me his medical power of attorney, which would allow me to make decisions on his behalf in case of a medical emergency. Additionally, I requested the right to continue living in his house if I outlived him. These requests were reasonable, considering the level of care and support I was providing. However, Richard declined, not wanting to complicate matters for his children. Despite these unresolved issues, our relationship continued to thrive. I took pride in maintaining my financial independence. I purchased a condo and rented it out, ensuring I had a steady income stream. This decision was a practical one, allowing me to support Richard without compromising my own financial stability. It was important to me that I remained self-sufficient, even as I devoted much of my time and energy to our relationship. The more we talked about our future, the more I realized the complexities of balancing love with practical considerations. I had always believed in the importance of mutual respect and support in a relationship. Richard's reluctance to marry, and his refusal to grant me any formal recognition made me question the depth of his commitment. While I understood his reasons, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. I wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to overcome these obstacles, but the reality was more complicated. Over time, I learned to accept the limitations of our relationship. I focused on the positive aspects, our shared interests, our deep conversations, and the companionship we provided each other. I found solace in the fact that, despite our differences, we had built a meaningful connection. However, the underlying tension about our future and the unresolved issues regarding our commitment always lingered in the background. It happened about 6 months ago. Richard, my boyfriend of 15 years, suffered a transient ischemic attack, TIA, often referred to as a mini-stroke. The event was sudden and terrifying, sending a shockwave through the comfortable routine we had established over the years. It was a typical evening. Richard and I were enjoying a quiet night at home. We had just finished dinner and were sitting in the living room, him reading the newspaper and me with a book. Suddenly, Richard slumped in his chair, his face contorted with pain. His speech became slurred, and his right arm went limp. Panic gripped me as I realized something was terribly wrong. My immediate fear was that he was having a full-blown stroke. I acted quickly, dialing 911 with trembling hands. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but those minutes felt like an eternity. I held Richard's hand, trying to comfort him while silently praying for the ambulance to arrive. When the paramedics finally came, they moved with practiced efficiency, loading Richard onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. I followed them to the hospital, my heart racing with fear and worry. At the hospital, Richard was taken into the emergency room for immediate evaluation. I was left in the waiting area, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. The sterile environment, with its harsh fluorescent lights and the incessant beeping of medical equipment, only heightened my distress. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I waited for any news about Richard's condition. Then, his daughter and ex-wife arrived. His daughter, whom I had always found somewhat distant, immediately took charge. She approached the nurses, demanding updates on her father's condition. Her mother, Richard's ex-wife, followed closely behind. Their presence added an unexpected layer of tension to an already fraught situation. They barely acknowledged me as they marched straight into the emergency room. A nurse soon approached me, conveying a message from Richard's daughter. They wanted to be alone with him. They insisted on being together as a family during this critical time, effectively pushing me aside. Despite my protests, I was asked to leave the room. The nurse, although sympathetic, explained that it was best to respect their wishes. Standing in the hallway, I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and profound sadness. I had been the one to call the ambulance, the one who had rushed him to the hospital, yet here I was, excluded from the room, cast aside by the very people who had not been there when it mattered. It was a stark reminder of my unofficial status in Richard's life, despite our deep connection and years of shared experiences. I paced the hallway, trying to process my emotions. The exclusion stung deeply, highlighting the fragile and uncertain nature of my role in Richard's life. I had been his partner for 15 years, but in this critical moment, I was treated as an outsider. The emotional impact of being marginalized by his family was significant. I felt like I was invisible, my contributions and care disregarded. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally emerged with an update. Richard's condition had stabilized. The TIA had been a temporary blockage of blood flow to the brain, a warning sign of potential more severe issues in the future. He would need to stay in the hospital for further observation and treatment. Relief washed over me, tempered by the exhaustion and emotional strain of the day's events. As Richard's daughter and ex-wife continued their vigil inside the room, I remained outside, grappling with my feelings. The hospital staff, seeing my distress, offered kind words and gestures, but it did little to alleviate the sense of alienation I felt. I spent the night in the waiting area, refusing to leave until I could see Richard myself. The following morning, Richard's daughter stepped out to get coffee. Seizing the moment, I quietly entered Richard's room. He was lying in bed, looking frail but conscious. When he saw me, his eyes softened with relief. I sat beside him, holding his hand, and we talked in hushed tones. He apologized for his daughter's behavior, but the damage was already done. The sense of exclusion and marginalization I had experienced could not be easily undone. After a brief visit, I was asked to leave again as his daughter returned. The emotional turmoil of the previous night replayed in my mind as I drove home. I felt a profound sense of betrayal and disillusionment. Despite my dedication and care, I had been treated as though I didn't belong. The drive home was long and silent, each mile filled with heavy thoughts. Once home, the familiar surroundings felt strangely alien. The events at the hospital had created a rift, making our shared space feel less like a haven, and more like a reminder of my uncertain place in Richard's life. I spent the day reflecting on our relationship, questioning my future with him. The following days were filled with routine hospital visits. I continued to bring Richard his favorite books and snacks, trying to provide comfort and normalcy. Our conversations were strained, overshadowed by the recent events. Richard was visibly troubled by his daughter's actions, but there was little he could do to change the dynamics of his family. One afternoon, during one of my visits, I found myself alone with Richard. We talked about the future, and I reiterated my desire to be included in his medical decisions and living arrangements. Richard, though sympathetic, remained firm in his stance. He did not want to complicate matters for his children. His refusal, though understandable, left me feeling unvalued and unsupported. Richard's condition slowly improved, and he was eventually discharged from the hospital. The drive home was filled with an uncomfortable silence. As we pulled into the driveway, I knew a difficult conversation awaited us. Over a cup of tea in the kitchen, I told Richard about my decision to move out. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and sorrow. He understood my reasons but pleaded with me to reconsider. I explained that while I loved him deeply, the events at the hospital had highlighted the limitations of our relationship. I needed to prioritize my own well-being and security, something I had neglected in my effort to support him. Richard listened, his expression a mix of regret and sadness. He apologized for the actions of his family, but the damage had been done. My mind was made up. Packing my belongings was a painful process. Each item I placed in the box felt like a piece of our shared history, a reminder of the life we had built together. The sense of loss was overwhelming, but I knew that this was the right decision for my own well-being. I moved into my condo, finding solace in the familiar surroundings and the sense of independence it provided. In the months that followed, Richard experienced more TIAs and was eventually unable to work. I struggled with feelings of guilt and sadness, questioning whether I had made the right decision. However, I also felt a sense of relief, knowing that I had reclaimed my autonomy and ensured my own stability. I continued to support Richard from a distance, ensuring that he had the care he needed. However, the dynamics of our relationship had fundamentally changed. However, I was wrong. Richard's daughter, Susan, had always been a complicated figure in our relationship. Though I had never had any major confrontations with her before, I had always sensed a certain animosity from her. She was in her mid-30s, a striking woman with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Susan had never fully accepted me into her father's life, always keeping me at arm's length, but her actions following Richard's TIA revealed a side of her that I hadn't seen before. A few weeks after I moved out, my phone rang late one evening. It was Susan. I answered, expecting a civil conversation at the very least. Instead, her voice, filled with venom, erupted on the other end of the line. She accused me of abandoning her father in his time of need, calling me selfish and heartless. Her words were a barrage of insults, each one sharper and more hurtful than the last. She claimed I had left because I couldn't handle the responsibility and that I had never truly cared for him. The conversation was short, but the impact was lasting. Her accusations were not just painful. They were deeply unfair. Susan's anger seemed to stem from a belief that I had somehow betrayed her father, but I knew the truth was more complex. When I left, I believed that it might be easier for her to take care of Richard without feeling like she had to compete with me for his attention. I thought she would welcome the opportunity to step up and take on a more significant role in his care. But her reaction suggested otherwise. The conversation left me shaken and doubting my decision, even though I knew deep down that I had made the right choice for myself. Despite the hostility from Susan, I continued to care for Richard from a distance. I called regularly to check on him and coordinated with his caregivers to ensure he had everything he needed. But Susan's words lingered in my mind, casting a shadow over my actions and making me question my motives. One night, about a month after that call, I was on my way to buy groceries. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the streets were quiet. As I walked past a local bar, I noticed someone familiar slipping inside. It was Susan. I was taken aback. Richard's condition required constant attention, and I couldn't help but wonder why she was at a bar instead of at home taking care of him. Curiosity and concern battled within me as I stood there, contemplating what I had just seen. I continued my errands, but the image of Susan entering the bar stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. If Susan was out drinking late at night, who was looking after Richard? This question gnawed at me, and I felt a growing sense of unease. Had I been wrong to trust that she would take care of him in my absence? The thought that Richard might not be receiving the care he needed was troubling. The next day, I decided to call Richard's nurse to get an update on his condition. The nurse assured me that Richard was stable and that he was receiving the necessary care. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Susan's late-night outing had planted a seed of doubt in my mind, Was she as committed to her father's well-being as she claimed to be? The incident made me question everything I thought I knew about her. As the weeks went by, I tried to focus on my own life, but the sense of guilt and worry persisted. I continued to check in on Richard, and each time, I made sure to ask about his care and well-being. The responses were always positive, but Susan's behavior continued to trouble me. I began to realize that her anger towards me might not have been just about my leaving. There seemed to be more to her story, and her actions hinted at a deeper complexity. One afternoon, I could no longer contain my growing concern for Richard's well-being. Susan's erratic behavior and frequent absences had become too troubling to ignore. Deciding that a direct confrontation was necessary, I picked up the phone and called her, requesting a meeting. To my surprise, Susan agreed without much resistance, and we arranged to meet at a local cafe the following day. As I walked into the cafe, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Susan was already seated at a small table near the window, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of wariness and irritation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead, and slid into the chair opposite her. "Thank you for meeting with me, Susan," I began, trying to keep my tone calm and neutral. She nodded curtly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you want, Ellen?" I decided to address the issue head-on. "I saw you at the bar the other night," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm concerned about the times you're away, and how it affects your father's care." Susan's eyes widened in surprise, and then her expression shifted to one of defensiveness. "I'm allowed to have my own life," she snapped. "I need a break from the stress of taking care of my father. You don't understand how hard it is." Her response, while reasonable on the surface, did little to alleviate my concerns. "I understand that everyone needs a break," I replied gently. "But Richard's condition requires consistent care. What arrangements are in place when you're not there?" Susan's agitation grew, and she leaned forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "Are you spying on me now? Trying to undermine everything I do? I'm doing the best I can, and you have no right to question me." I tried to remain calm, even as her accusations stung. "I'm not trying to undermine you, Susan. I just want to make sure Richard is getting the care he needs. I'm worried about him." "You're always worried," she spat, her voice rising. "But you're not here day in and day out dealing with all of this. It's easy for you to sit back and judge." The conversation was rapidly spiraling out of control. I could see that my questions were only fueling her anger, but I couldn't walk away without addressing my concerns. "Susan, please try to understand. This isn't about judging you. It's about ensuring that Richard is safe and well cared for." She glared at me, her face flushed with anger. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think you can just waltz in and fix things? Well, you can't. You don't know what it's like to be in my shoes." Her words cut deep and I felt a surge of frustration. "I'm not trying to take over, Susan. I just want to help. We both care about Richard, and we need to work together." But my words fell on deaf ears. Susan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm done here," she snapped. "Stay out of my way, Ellen. You're not helping anyone." With that, she stormed out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, stunned and disheartened. The conversation had ended abruptly, with no resolution and more questions than answers. I stared down at the table, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. I had hoped that a direct confrontation would clear the air and lead to a constructive solution, but it had only served to deepen the divide between us. As I left the cafe, I couldn't help but replay the conversation in my mind. Susan's defensiveness and anger were understandable to some extent, given the immense pressure she was under. But her refusal to discuss Richard's care arrangements left me deeply concerned. I worried that her stress and frequent absences were putting Richard at risk. In the days that followed, I continued to wrestle with my feelings. I loved Richard deeply, and the thought of him not being properly cared for was unbearable. Yet Susan's reaction made it clear that my involvement was unwelcome. I was caught between my desire to ensure Richard's well-being, and the reality that my presence was creating more conflict. One evening I decided to visit Richard unannounced. I needed to see for myself how he was doing. When I arrived at his house, I was greeted by one of his caregivers, who seemed surprised but not displeased to see me. I found Richard in his room, sitting in his armchair and reading a book. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, his eyes lighting up with a warmth that melted away some of my anxiety. We talked for a while, and I asked him about his care. Richard assured me that he was being well taken care of, but there was a hint of sadness in his voice. He missed our time together, and I could see the strain that Susan's presence was causing him. It became clear that while he appreciated her efforts, the dynamic between them was fraught with tension. As I left that evening, I felt a renewed sense of resolve. I decided to maintain my distance but remain vigilant. I continued to check in regularly with Richard's caregivers and ensured that they had my contact information in case of any emergencies. I also made a point to visit Richard more often, making sure to coordinate with his caregivers so as not to disrupt his routine. The months that followed were challenging. Susan's hostility towards me did not abate, and each interaction with her was strained. However, my visits with Richard brought a measure of peace to both of us. He appreciated my efforts, and I found comfort in knowing that I was still able to contribute to his well-being in some capacity. On one particularly cold afternoon, I decided to visit Richard unannounced. As I approached the house, I heard raised voices coming from inside. It was unmistakably Susan, her tone sharp and accusatory. I paused at the door, hesitant to enter but compelled by concern. I strained to hear the words exchanged but could only make out fragments of the argument. "I'm tired of this." Susan's voice rang out, filled with frustration. "You're not doing your job properly. You're fired." The front door swung open and Richard's caretaker emerged, her face flushed and eyes downcast. She almost collided with me as she hurried out. I reached out to stop her, gently placing a hand on her arm. "What happened? Why are you leaving?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. It's nothing. Just a misunderstanding," she muttered, shaking her head sadly before continuing down the walkway, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Susan had fired the caretaker, a woman who had been providing diligent care for Richard. My heart sank. I knew I had to go inside and check on Richard, but I also felt an increasing unease about Susan's actions and their impact on her father's well-being. When I entered the house, Richard was sitting in his usual chair, looking more worn out than usual. He greeted me with a weak smile, but his eyes reflected a deep sadness. "Ellen, it's good to see you," he said, his voice weary. I sat down beside him, taking his hand in mine. "What happened with the caretaker, Richard? Why did Susan fire her?" He sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "Susan thinks the caretaker isn't doing enough. She's been very stressed lately, taking on more than she can handle. I tried to intervene, but Susan can be quite stubborn." I felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. Richard needed consistent care, and Susan's behavior was jeopardizing his health. I couldn't understand why she would dismiss someone who had been doing their job well, especially when Richard's condition required professional attention. Over the next few weeks I noticed a decline in Richard's health. Without a dedicated caretaker, the burden fell entirely on Susan, who seemed increasingly overwhelmed and irritable. Every time I visited, Richard appeared more fatigued, and the atmosphere in the house was tense. Susan's presence, or rather, her absence, loomed over everything, a constant source of stress. One day, I decided to have a candid conversation with Richard. I needed to understand what was happening and how I could help. We sat in the living room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. "Richard, I'm worried about you," I began gently. "You need proper care, and with the caretaker gone, I'm not sure you're getting it. What can we do to make things better?" He looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and resignation. "Ellen, I appreciate your concern, I really do. But Susan insists on handling things herself. She feels it's her responsibility." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "But it's clear she's struggling. Maybe we can find a compromise? Another caretaker, someone Susan approves of?" Richard shook his head slowly. "I've tried suggesting that, but Susan is very particular. She doesn't trust easily, and she's determined to do things her way." The conversation left me feeling helpless. I wanted to support Richard, but Susan's interference made it nearly impossible. My visits continued, each one filled with a growing sense of frustration and concern. Richard's health was deteriorating, and Susan's handling of the situation was only making things worse. One evening, as I was leaving Richard's house, I ran into the former caretaker at the grocery store. She looked healthier and more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her, but there was still a lingering sadness in her eyes. I approached her, hoping to gain some insight into what had happened. "Hi, it's good to see you again," I said warmly. "I'm sorry about what happened at Richard's. Can you tell me more about why Susan fired you?" She hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "Susan is difficult to work with," she finally admitted. "She has very high standards and gets frustrated easily. I tried my best, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. I think she's under a lot of pressure, and it's affecting her judgment." I nodded, absorbing her words. "Thank you for telling me. I just want to make sure Richard is okay. He needs proper care." The caretaker gave me a sad smile. "He does. Just keep an eye on him. And if you can, try to talk to Susan. She needs help too, even if she doesn't realize it." I decided to have a direct conversation with Susan. I called her and suggested meeting to discuss Richard's care. To my surprise, she agreed to meet at a local cafe the next morning. I hoped that a neutral setting would help facilitate a productive conversation. As I arrived at the cafe, I saw Susan already seated, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked tired, her face etched with stress and fatigue. I took a deep breath and approached her table, determined to keep the conversation focused and constructive. "Good morning, Susan," I greeted her, trying to sound as calm and supportive as possible. "Morning," she replied curtly, barely glancing up from her coffee. I sat down and took a moment to gather my thoughts. "Susan, I've been really worried about your father. His health is declining, and I think we need to find a more sustainable solution for his care. I'd like to recommend hiring a professional nurse." Susan's reaction was immediate and intense. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. "Who the hell do you think you are, Ellen? This is my family, my responsibility. You have no right to interfere." Taken aback by her hostility, I tried to remain composed. "Susan, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to make sure Richard gets the care he needs. This is about his well-being, not about us." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Sure, that's what you want everyone to believe. But I know better. You're just worried about his estate, aren't you? Making sure you get a piece of the pie." Her words stung and I felt my face flush with anger. "That's not true, and you know it. I care about Richard, and I've been part of his life for 15 years. This is about his health, not his money." Susan's expression hardened, and she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I don't need your help, Ellen. And I don't need you meddling in our family affairs. Stay out of it." Frustrated and hurt, I took a deep breath, trying to find a way to reach her. "Susan, this isn't about control or money. It's about making sure your father is taken care of. We need to work together." But it was clear that Susan was not willing to listen. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm done here. Don't ever talk to me about this again. And stay away from my father's business." With that, she walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, stunned and disheartened. I sat for a while, trying to process the confrontation. My intentions had been genuine, but Susan's accusations and hostility had made it clear that she saw me as a threat rather than an ally. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but wonder about Susan's motivations. Her refusal to accept help seemed rooted in something deeper than just distrust of me. I knew her relationship with her mother was strained. Susan had mentioned once, in passing, that her mother had remarried and started a new family, leaving Susan feeling abandoned and redundant. Perhaps her need to control her father's care was a way to assert some sense of importance and stability in her life. 2 weeks had passed since my last visit to Richard. During that time, I had made a conscious decision to step back, to focus on my own life and well-being. It wasn't easy, but I felt that after all the years of navigating the complexities of our relationship and dealing with Susan's hostility, I needed to be a bit selfish. I needed to find my own space and reclaim my independence. The first few days were the hardest. I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and worry about Richard's condition. But I reminded myself that I had already done so much, and it was time for me to live my life without the constant burden of his declining health and family drama. I immersed myself in hobbies I had neglected, reconnected with old friends, and tried to find joy in the little things again. Slowly, I began to feel a sense of relief and freedom. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Richard. My heart skipped a beat as I answered, unsure of what to expect. "Hi Richard," I greeted him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ellen, it's good to hear your voice," he replied, but there was a sadness in his tone that I couldn't ignore. "I've missed you. You haven't been by to visit." His words hit me hard. I had been so focused on distancing myself that I hadn't considered how my absence might affect him. Despite everything, I still cared deeply for Richard, and the thought of him feeling lonely pained me. "I'm sorry, Richard," I said honestly. "I've been trying to take some time for myself, to focus on my own life for a bit." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Richard spoke again. "I understand, Ellen. But I've been feeling very lonely. Susan often leaves me alone at night, going out and sometimes not coming back until late. I've been having to manage on my own." His words were like a dagger to my heart. I felt a surge of pity and frustration. Susan had assured me she would take care of him, but it seemed she was failing in her responsibilities. I couldn't ignore the pang of guilt that welled up inside me. "Richard, I didn't know," I replied, my voice softening. "I thought Susan was taking care of you." "She tries, but she's not always here," he admitted. "I understand you need your own life, but it's been hard without you around." I took a deep breath, grappling with my emotions. "Richard, I think maybe we've grown apart. It's been difficult for both of us, and I'm not sure where we stand anymore." His silence spoke volumes. I knew my words were harsh, but they were the truth. Our relationship had been strained for a long time, and the events of the past months had only widened the gap between us. "I see," he finally said, his voice tinged with sadness. "I just wish things were different." We talked for a little while longer, but the conversation was strained and filled with unspoken words. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I had been honest with him, but it didn't make the situation any easier. The days that followed were filled with introspection. I couldn't shake the feeling of pity for Richard, knowing he was often left alone. Despite everything, I still cared deeply for him, and the thought of him suffering weighed heavily on my conscience. I wondered if I had made the right decision by stepping back, or if I had been too selfish. One evening, as I sat in my living room reflecting on everything, I received another call from Richard. This time, his voice was more subdued. "Ellen, I know things have been difficult. But I need your help," he said, sounding more vulnerable than I had ever heard him before. "Susan has been out almost every night, and I'm struggling. I don't know what to do." His plea tugged at my heartstrings. I knew I couldn't ignore him. Despite the decision to distance myself, I couldn't abandon him completely. "I'll come by tomorrow," I said gently. "We'll figure something out." The next day I visited Richard. He looked more fragile than ever, and it was clear that he had been struggling. We sat down together, and he opened up about the challenges he had been facing. Susan's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and her absences were taking a toll on him. She often left without explanation, and he was left to fend for himself. "I don't know what's gotten into her," Richard said, his voice filled with worry. "She used to be so responsible, but now it's like she's avoiding me." I listened, feeling a mixture of frustration and compassion. Susan's actions were unacceptable, and Richard deserved better care. But I also knew that confronting Susan directly would likely lead to more conflict. "Richard, I'm going to help you get through this," I said firmly. "We'll find a solution together." We discussed various options, including reaching out to other family members and finding additional professional help. I suggested contacting a home care agency to provide more consistent support, and Richard agreed. The following days were busy as I coordinated with care providers and ensured Richard's needs were met. I also spoke with Emily, the nurse who had been helping Richard part-time, and arranged for her to increase her visits. Emily was a godsend, and her presence provided much-needed stability. During this time, I also attempted to reach out to Susan, hoping to address the situation diplomatically. I called her and left messages, but she didn't respond. It was clear that she was avoiding both me and the responsibilities of caring for her father. One evening, while I was at Richard's house, Susan finally returned home. It was late, and she looked disheveled and exhausted. She seemed surprised to see me there, but her surprise quickly turned to anger. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I'm here to help Richard," I replied calmly. "He's been struggling, and we need to find a better solution for his care." Susan scoffed, crossing her arms. "I don't need your help, Ellen. This is my family, my responsibility." "It's clear that you're overwhelmed, Susan," I said gently. "There's no shame in asking for help. Richard needs consistent care, and I think we should work together to make sure he gets it." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You just want to interfere so you can get your hands on his estate. I know your type." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "This isn't about money, Susan. It's about Richard's well-being. We both care about him, and he deserves the best care possible." Susan's hostility didn't abate, but she didn't argue further. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling both frustrated and determined. Recently I focused on reclaiming my own life, but my concern for Richard never truly faded. I still called to check in on him and coordinated with his caregivers to ensure he had everything he needed. Despite our strained relationship and Susan's ongoing hostility, my love for Richard remained steadfast. Last month, while I was out running errands, I received a call from Richard's nurse. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Ellen, Richard has had a fall. He's being taken to the hospital now. I thought you should know." My heart raced, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. The drive there felt interminable, my mind racing with worry about Richard's condition. I prayed that he would be okay. When I arrived at the hospital, I rushed to the emergency room. I found Richard lying in a hospital bed, gradually waking up. Relief washed over me as I saw his eyes flutter open. He looked groggy but seemed to be regaining consciousness. "Richard," I called softly, stepping closer to his bedside. "How are you feeling?" He turned his head slowly to look at me, a weak smile forming on his lips. "Ellen, you're here," he murmured. I'm okay, I think, just a bit shaken up." I reached out and gently squeezed his hand. I'm so glad you're awake. You gave us all a scare. As I stood there, holding Richard's hand, the door to the room swung open, and Susan stumbled in. She reeked of alcohol, her movements unsteady and her eyes wild. She glared at me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. What are you doing here? She slurred, her voice dripping with venom. Haven't you done enough? I tried to remain calm, but her words and the sight of her in such a state were infuriating. Susan, I'm here to check on Richard. He's just had a fall and... Shut up! She screamed, cutting me off. You're always meddling, always trying to interfere. This is my family, not yours. Her words were like a knife to the heart. I had come to help Richard, and here she was, drunk and belligerent, attacking me for caring. The frustration and anger that had been building up inside me for months finally reached a boiling point. Susan, you're drunk, you need to leave, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't helping anyone. Don't tell me what to do, she shouted, stumbling closer. You're nothing but a selfish, greedy. Before I could stop myself, my hand flew up and I slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the small hospital room, and for a moment, there was a stunned silence. Susan's eyes widened in shock, and then she lunged at me, but the nurses and a few other visitors quickly intervened, pulling us apart. How dare you? Susan screamed, trying to break free from their grasp. You'll pay for this, you bitch. I stood there, breathing heavily, my hand still stinging from the impact. The room was a blur of chaos and noise, but through it all, I could hear Richard's voice, weak but stern. Ellen, go home, he said, his voice filled with disappointment. You shouldn't have hit her. Just go. His words cut deeper than any of Susan's accusations. I looked at him, my heart breaking. Richard, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Just go, he repeated, closing his eyes as if to shut out the world. Tears filled my eyes as I turned and walked out of the room. The weight of Richard's disapproval and the confrontation with Susan hung heavily on me. As I left the hospital, I felt a profound sense of loss and sadness. The man I had cared for, loved, and supported for so many years had turned me away, and I didn't know if I could ever repair the damage that had been done. In the days that followed, I kept my distance from Richard and his family. I needed time to process what had happened and to figure out how to move forward. The guilt and sadness were overwhelming, and I struggled to find a way to reconcile my actions with my intentions. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the events replaying in my mind, I received a call from Emily. Her voice was gentle, filled with concern. Ellen, I wanted to check in on you. I heard about what happened at the hospital. I sighed, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me. It's been really hard, Emily. I don't know what to do. Ellen, you've been through a lot. It's understandable that you're feeling this way. But you've always had Richard's best interests at heart. Don't lose sight of that. Her words brought a small measure of comfort, but they didn't erase the pain. Thank you, Emily. I just don't know how to fix this. Sometimes it's not about fixing things, she said softly. Sometimes it's about finding a way to move forward, even if it's not the way you envisioned. I spent the next few days reflecting on Emily's words. I realized that I couldn't change what had happened, but I could decide how to respond. I decided to write a letter to Richard, expressing my feelings and apologizing for my actions. It was the only way I could think of to convey my thoughts without causing more conflict. In the letter, I poured out my heart, explaining the frustration and worry that had driven me to slap Susan. I expressed my regret and apologized for my actions, hoping that Richard would understand my intentions, even if he couldn't forgive my outburst. A few days later, I mailed the letter, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation. I didn't know if Richard would read it or if it would make any difference, but it was the only way I could think of to reach out to him. In the meantime, I focused on my own well-being. I continued to see friends, pursue hobbies, and take care of myself. It wasn't easy, but I knew I needed to find a way to move forward, even if it meant doing so without Richard in my life. Update. A month had passed. I hadn't heard from Richard or Susan since then, and I had decided to focus on my work and try to put the events behind me. Immersing myself in my job was a way to distract myself from the guilt and sadness that lingered after our falling out. My days became a blur of meetings, deadlines, and tasks that kept my mind occupied, leaving little room for personal reflection. However, life has a way of bringing back unresolved issues when you least expect it. One day, while catching up with a mutual acquaintance, I overheard a conversation that stopped me in my tracks. The acquaintance mentioned, in a hushed tone, that Susan had contracted HIV due to her reckless behavior. The term disease of the century echoed in my mind, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a devastating revelation that added a new layer of complexity to everything that had happened. I tried to process this information as I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions. Susan's illness explained so much about her erratic behavior and her hostility towards me. She had been struggling with a secret burden, one that she had not shared with anyone, least of all her father. The realization that Richard was unaware of his daughter's condition weighed heavily on me. He was already fighting his own health battles, and now his daughter was seeking death as an escape from her pain. As I pulled into my driveway, I felt a sense of dread and despair settle over me. The weight of what I had learned felt unbearable, and I knew that I couldn't simply ignore it. My heart ached for Richard and Susan, both suffering in their own ways, both isolated in their struggles. The walls of my home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, trapping me with my thoughts and regrets. Over the next few days, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on my work. The knowledge of Susan's illness gnawed at me, making it impossible to concentrate. Each time I sat down at my desk, trying to immerse myself in my tasks, my mind would drift back to that devastating revelation. The weight of what I had learned seemed to press down on my shoulders, making even the simplest tasks feel insurmountable. I replayed our last conversation in my mind over and over again. The harsh words exchanged, the anger that had driven us apart, and the intense frustration that had boiled over into that confrontation. Knowing what I knew now, I felt a profound sense of guilt. Had I been too harsh? Had I failed to see the signs of her suffering? These questions haunted me, eroding my sense of peace and leaving me feeling helpless and conflicted. Every glance at my computer screen or stack of papers brought a pang of guilt. The emails and deadlines that once seemed so important now felt trivial in the face of Susan's struggle. My mind wandered back to that fateful day at the hospital. The look of pain in Susan's eyes, and the bitter accusations we had hurled at each other. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much pain she must have been in, pain that I had failed to recognize. It was clear to me that while Richard was struggling with his illness, his daughter was fighting her own battle, one that was equally devastating. Susan's reckless behavior, her late-night escapades, and her erratic absences were not just signs of irresponsibility. They were cries for help, symptoms of a deeper, more insidious pain that she had been hiding from everyone, including herself. The realization that she had been seeking death to escape her suffering was almost too much to bear. It was a stark reminder of the profound impact that our actions and relationships can have on those around us. As I reflected on this, I began to understand the broader implications of what I had learned. It was only then that I truly grasped how the relationship between husband and wife greatly affects the children's perception. Richard and his ex-wife's tumultuous relationship, their bitter divorce, and the emotional fallout had all left deep scars on Susan. She had grown up in an environment where love and support were conditional, where trust had been broken, and where emotional wounds had never truly healed. The dysfunction in Richard's marriage had created a ripple effect, shaping Susan's perceptions and behaviors in ways that were now painfully evident. Her desperate attempts to escape her reality, her anger, and her fear were all rooted in the experiences of her past. She had watched her parents' relationship fall apart, had felt the sting of abandonment from her mother, and had struggled to find her place in a world that seemed to offer no solace. As these realizations settled in, I felt a growing sense of responsibility. I couldn't change the past, but I could try to make amends for my part in the present. Susan needed support and understanding, not judgment and criticism. Richard needed to know the truth about his daughter's struggles so that he could be there for her in a meaningful way. But how could I approach this delicate situation without causing more harm? I divorced my wife because of the changes she made after I confided in her about being raped as a child. I am Alex, a 27-year-old software engineer, and this is the story of my wife, Emily, and me. Our lives together have woven a tapestry of shared moments and unspoken emotions, with threads of joy, and strands of tension that sometimes seem to fray. In the quiet suburban neighborhood where we live, our home stands as a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity. It's a cozy 2-story house with a well-tended garden out front, where Emily spends hours nurturing her beloved roses. She has an affinity for colors. Soft blues and greens dominate our living room, where we often unwind after our respective workdays. Physically, I'm of average height with a lean build, often sporting a 5 o'clock shadow that Emily teasingly calls my thinker's beard. My days revolve around coding, solving intricate puzzles of algorithms that intrigue me endlessly. Weekends, though, are for outdoor escapades, hiking trails or exploring nearby towns, activities Emily enjoys just as much as I do. Emily, on the other hand, exudes a warmth that draws people in effortlessly. With her flowing auburn hair and bright hazel eyes, she's the epitome of approachability. Her days are spent as a social worker, dedicating herself to helping children navigate turbulent lives, a calling that reflects her compassionate nature. We met during college orientation, where our paths crossed in a crowded cafeteria. She was holding a stack of books precariously, and I offered my assistance, clumsily charming her with my awkwardness. Our journey together began with tentative steps through the maze of college life, where we discovered a shared love for indie music and late-night philosophical debates over cups of cheap dorm coffee. As our friendship blossomed into something deeper, our adventures took us beyond campus, road trips to music festivals, impromptu picnics in secluded parks, and the thrill of discovering new passions together. The decision to move in together came naturally after we graduated. We found a cozy apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place where the morning sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on mismatched furniture we inherited from family and friends. It was our little haven, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint hum of Emily's favorite indie tunes playing softly in the background. Adjusting to living under the same roof brought its challenges and joys. We discovered each other's quirks, Emily's penchant for leaving sticky notes on the fridge with reminders and my habit of leaving shoes by the door. Despite occasional disagreements over whose turn it was to do the dishes or walk the neighbor's dog, we learned the art of compromise and laughter that echoed through our shared spaces. Career paths diverged as we delved deeper into our chosen fields. Emily's passion for social work led her to a local children's center, where her empathy and dedication shone brightly. Long hours and emotionally taxing days were met with a steadfast resolve to make a difference in the lives of vulnerable children. I, on the other hand, immersed myself in the world of technology, navigating the intricate landscapes of coding and software development. Late nights at the office were balanced by moments of triumph when lines of code finally yielded to elegant solutions. Amidst the chaos of career uncertainties, we leaned on each other for support. Emily's comforting words and unwavering belief in my abilities became my anchor during moments of self-doubt. In turn, I became her sounding board, listening to her aspirations and dreams, offering reassurance when setbacks loomed large. 2 years into our journey together, we stood hand in hand beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, surrounded by family and friends who had witnessed our love flourish. Emily's radiant smile illuminated the day as she walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on mine with unwavering certainty. Vows exchanged in whispers carried promises of a future filled with shared dreams and unwavering devotion. The reception that followed was a testament to our shared joy, a blend of heartfelt toasts, laughter echoing off the walls, and dance moves that defied our usual grace. Amidst the celebration, I stole glances at Emily, marveling at the depth of emotion etched across her face. It was a day that encapsulated the culmination of our journey so far, a day we vowed to cherish as we embarked on the next chapter of our lives together. As the evening drew to a close, we stole away to a quiet corner of the venue, our fingers intertwined as we marveled at the surrealness of the day. Emily's eyes sparkled with unshed tears of happiness, her hand resting gently against my cheek as she whispered promises of forever. In that moment, surrounded by the love and warmth of our loved ones, I knew with unwavering certainty that our love was a force that could weather any storm. Our daily routine now revolves around a delicate balance of work and domestic life. Mornings begin with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a ritual I cherish, preparing us for the day ahead. Emily rushes off to her job at a local children's center, leaving a lingering kiss on my cheek. Despite our busy schedules, evenings are sacrosanct, a time for shared dinners and conversations about everything and nothing. Yet beneath this facade of domestic bliss, subtle tensions simmer. Our journey together has not been without its trials. Despite our dreams of starting a family, the path to parenthood has been fraught with heartache. Months turned into years of disappointment as we navigated fertility treatments and consultations with specialists. Each negative pregnancy test felt like a heavy blow, leaving us both grappling with a sense of loss and inadequacy. For Emily, the weight of expectation, both societal and personal, bears down heavily. Her role as a caregiver extends beyond her profession, nurturing a longing within her that remains unfulfilled. I see it in the way she withdraws at times, retreating into herself to cope with the monthly cycles of hope and despair. Her once radiant smile now carries a subtle veil of sorrow, a reflection of the emotional toll our struggles have taken on her spirit. As for me, the inability to provide the family we yearned for gnaws at my core. I bury myself deeper in my work, seeking solace in the intricate algorithms that once fascinated me. The closeness we once shared feels strained under the weight of unspoken grief and the fear of what the future holds. Nights that were once filled with whispered dreams and shared warmth now echo with a silence that speaks volumes. Physical intimacy, once a cornerstone of our bond, has become a delicate dance of longing and apprehension. The touch that once ignited sparks of passion now carries an unspoken hesitation. We move through the motions with a practiced familiarity, yet the connection that once bound us feels tenuous, slipping further from our grasp. I find myself longing for the days when our bodies spoke a language of their own, a language that conveyed love, desire, and a shared understanding without the need for words. Now, our embraces are punctuated by unspoken questions and fleeting moments of hesitation. Emily's touch when it comes is gentle but guarded, as if afraid to reopen wounds that have yet to heal. I yearn to bridge the distance between us, to reclaim the intimacy that once defined us. Yet each attempt feels like tiptoeing through a minefield of unspoken fears and unmet expectations. I ache to comfort Emily, to reassure her of my unwavering love and devotion, but words fail me in the face of our shared grief. In our quest to navigate this tumultuous terrain, we have sought solace in different coping mechanisms. Emily throws herself into her work with renewed vigor, channeling her nurturing instincts into supporting vulnerable children who cross her path. Her dedication is both admirable and heartbreaking, a testament to her resilience in the face of adversity. For my part, I have turned inward, seeking solace in solitary pursuits and occasional outings with friends who offer a temporary distraction from the weight of our reality. Yet, amidst the distractions, the ache remains, a constant reminder of the void that looms large between us. In the midst of our struggles, there came a moment that breathed life into our relationship, a fragile oasis amidst the desert of uncertainty and grief. It was a cool evening in early spring, the kind that carries a hint of promise in the air. I had orchestrated a plan, a meticulously planned evening to remind Emily and myself of the love that bound us together. I had asked to leave work early that day, a request tinged with nervous anticipation. While Emily was busy at the children's center, I set the stage at home. The soft glow of candlelight danced across the dining room, casting flickering shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet untold. The table, adorned with Emily's favorite flowers, a bouquet of lilies, stood as a testament to my love and longing. In the kitchen, pots and pans clattered as I prepared a meal that spoke of comfort and familiarity. Emily's favorite pasta dish accompanied by a side of garlic bread. The savory aroma that filled the air mingled with the floral notes of the candles, creating an ambiance that promised an evening of shared warmth and intimacy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, heralding Emily's return, I felt a surge of nervous energy knotting my stomach. Would she sense the effort I had poured into this evening, the silent plea for us to reconnect amidst the storm that threatened to tear us apart? Emily's smile upon entering the house was like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds. She noticed the candles immediately, her eyes widening in surprise and a soft gasp escaping her lips. I took her coat and guided her to the table, pulling out a chair for her with a flourish that elicited a chuckle from her. A sound that warmed my heart more than any candlelit ambiance could. We dined slowly, savoring each bite as if the flavors held the secrets of our shared history. Conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter that echoed through the walls of our home. The wine, a deep red that Emily favored, served as a catalyst, loosening the knots of tension that had bound us in silence for too long. After dinner, I insisted on clearing the table and washing the dishes, a gesture that earned me a grateful smile and a gentle touch on my shoulder from Emily. As I dried my hands, I suggested we retire to the living room for the next phase of my carefully laid plan. In the cozy embrace of our living room, we settled onto the couch, the soft glow of the TV casting a gentle light upon us. I had chosen a movie, a classic romance, that I knew held sentimental value for Emily. The opening credits rolled, and I stole glances at her throughout, drinking in the sight of her relaxed form beside me. As the story unfolded on screen, our hands found each other, fingers intertwining in a silent promise of solidarity. The characters' trials and triumphs mirrored our own journey, moments of heartache and hope intertwined with the unyielding belief in the power of love to transcend all obstacles. With each passing scene, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to nurture the flickering flame of our bond. Emily's head rested against my shoulder, her breathing steady and even. I dared to hope that this evening, this fragile moment suspended in time, would serve as a catalyst for healing and renewal. The evening of our romantic date at home lingered in the air like a sweet echo of forgotten melodies. Emily and I found ourselves drawn closer, the intimacy we had shared reigniting a flicker of hope amidst the shadows of our struggles. Yet, as life often does, it offered a twist. A subtle shift that unraveled the fragile equilibrium we had so delicately crafted. A few nights after our memorable evening, Emily suggested we start watching a new series recommended by our friends. Baby Reindeer on Netflix. I had heard vague descriptions of its content, sexual abuse, stalking. But I reassured myself that my past was firmly behind me. I believed I could face any depiction of such themes with stoic resolve, confident in my ability to compartmentalize. With a sense of nonchalance that belied the storm brewing within, I agreed to watch the first episode. The opening scenes unfolded innocuously enough, introducing the protagonist and the premise of the show. Emily curled up beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on mine. A silent reassurance that anchored me amidst the growing unease. As the narrative delved deeper into the protagonist's experiences of manipulation and violation, A chill settled over me. A familiar echo of buried memories stirring beneath the surface. Scenes that mirrored fragments of my own past flashed across the screen, each frame a haunting reflection of the darkness I had long sought to bury. I felt Emily's gaze shift towards me, concern etched into the furrow of her brow. She sensed my discomfort, the subtle tension that coiled like a serpent within my chest. I forced a smile, dismissing her unspoken question with a wave of my hand. A feeble attempt to mask the turmoil that threatened to engulf me. In the silent interludes between scenes, flashes of memory assaulted my senses, fragments of a childhood innocence shattered by betrayal and violation. The babysitter's face, once blurred by the passage of time, now loomed vivid and menacing within the recesses of my mind. Her whispered promises of secrecy echoed in the hollow chambers of memory, a stark reminder of the scars that lingered beneath the surface. Emily, ever perceptive, sensed the shift in the air. A palpable change that left us both teetering on the edge of unspoken revelation. She paused the show, her touch gentle as she turned to face me. A question hanging unspoken in the silence that stretched between us. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a bitter taste of vulnerability seeping into my words as I confessed. It's about the show, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper amidst the echoes of the past. Emily's eyes widened in understanding, a flicker of anguish crossing her features as she realized the depth of my turmoil. When I was 9, my parents hired a babysitter for my younger brother and me while they were at work. She was a college student, a young woman full of laughter and seemingly boundless energy. At first, her presence felt like a welcome addition to our routine, a source of amusement and care during the long afternoons. Initially, our time together was filled with innocent games and playful banter. She would help us with our homework and indulge our requests for stories of her adventures at college. Her smile was infectious, lighting up the room whenever she entered. At first, she engaged us in games and activities, painting a picture of care and responsibility that lulled my young mind into a sense of security. But behind closed doors, when my brother was occupied elsewhere, her demeanor changed. Innocuous moments of play morphed into unsettling encounters, a breach of trust that left me confused and fearful. The incidents were fleeting, fragmented memories that lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. She silenced my protests with whispered assurances of secrecy, instilling a sense of shame that festered in silence. I was too young to articulate the discomfort that gnawed at me. A silent witness to acts that stained the purity of my childhood. Most of the time, I felt paralyzed. Unable to comprehend the gravity of what was happening, let alone muster the courage to stop it. She wielded her authority with a subtle but devastating effectiveness, manipulating my childlike trust with calculated precision. Each instance of abuse was followed by a peculiar ritual, a twisted form of affirmation disguised as kindness. She would buy me sweets or new video games for my Nintendo DS, a reward she called it. In my young mind, these gifts became a perverse currency, a means to placate her and earn fleeting moments of reprieve from her unwanted advances. In a strange and unsettling way, I found myself growing attached to her. Desperate for her approval and willing to endure her violations if it meant receiving her rewards. I knew even then, that what she was doing was wrong. The unease in the pit of my stomach never fully dissipated. A constant reminder of the boundaries she had crossed and the innocence she had shattered. Yet in the grip of fear and confusion, I remained silent. An unwitting accomplice to my own exploitation. Her threats loomed like dark shadows, casting a pall over my already fragile world. She warned me in hushed tones that if I ever spoke of what transpired between us, she would take my life. The weight of her words pressed down upon me, a suffocating silence that sealed my lips and shackled my voice in the chains of fear. I never dared to confide in my parents or anyone else. The shame and guilt I carried were as heavy as the threat that hung over me, a burden too great for my young shoulders to bear. The facade of normalcy I wore during those days masked the turmoil within, a mask I wore not out of deceit, but out of a desperate need to shield myself from the repercussions of revealing the truth. As I graduated from college and moved away, the immediate physical threat from my brother's babysitter ceased, but the emotional scars continued to haunt me. By this time, around the age when I began to grasp the concept of consent, I found myself grappling with the need to confront my past and seek understanding. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, I attempted to open up to my parents, staunch Catholics whose strict adherence to their faith colored their perception of morality and sexuality. Hoping for solace and guidance, I cautiously broached the subject, only to be met with disbelief and horror. Initially, they attributed my revelations to the corrupting influence of movies and media, accusing me of allowing my imagination to run wild with salacious fantasies. Their dismissiveness quickly gave way to anger and condemnation. My father, unable to reconcile my words with his worldview, responded with harsh words and, on occasion, physical punishment. A misguided attempt to suppress what he viewed as blasphemous accusations. My mother, torn between her maternal instincts and the teachings of her faith, punished me with a cold, silent disapproval, her disappointment casting a heavy shadow over our strained relationship. Seeking solace outside the confines of my troubled home, I turned to my friends, a desperate plea for empathy and support that fell upon deaf ears. My male friends, unequipped to comprehend the gravity of my disclosure, responded with callous remarks. They viewed my experiences through the lens of adolescent curiosity, their crude inquiries reducing my trauma to a crude joke or a badge of envy. My female friends too failed to grasp the magnitude of my revelations. They dismissed my words as fabrications, a desperate ploy for attention or sympathy. Their laughter, a painful echo of disbelief, reinforced my resolve to bury the past once more, a vow forged in the crucible of rejection and misunderstanding. Faced with rejection from both family and friends, I retreated into a self-imposed silence. A fortress of solitude built upon the shards of shattered trust and unanswered pleas for validation. I learned to bury the memories deep within, weaving a facade of normalcy to conceal the turmoil that churned within me. The wounds inflicted upon my soul, though invisible to the casual observer, bled quietly, a silent testament to the enduring scars of betrayal and abandonment. I vowed never to speak of my past again, a promise forged in the crucible of rejection and the relentless pursuit of closure. After revealing the depths of my turmoil to Emily, her reaction was a mixture of understanding and anguish, her eyes widening as she comprehended the weight of my unspoken pain. I stood there, guilt clawing at my insides, realizing the burden I had unknowingly placed upon her shoulders. Despite my fears, Emily enveloped me in a reassuring embrace, her touch offering solace amidst the storm raging within me. Her words, gentle and soothing, washed over me like a healing balm. "I'm here, Alex," she murmured softly against my hair, her voice a beacon of comfort in the darkness. "You don't have to face this alone." But as I paced the length of our bedroom, seeking solace in the solitude, doubts clawed at my conscience. Was it fair to disrupt our tranquil life together with the tumult of my unresolved trauma? Could Emily truly understand the depths of my anguish, or would my pain only serve to burden her further? The guilt of unloading my past onto her shoulders consumed me. Emily had always been my rock, my pillar of strength in times of uncertainty. I cherished the way she laughed freely, the warmth of her touch, and the unwavering support she offered me in every aspect of our life together. Now, I feared that my disclosure had tainted our relationship, casting a shadow over the love and happiness we had built. In the quiet of the night, as moonlight filtered through the curtains and cast soft shadows across our bedroom floor, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. The respite of solitude offered temporary relief, yet the echoes of Emily's embrace lingered, a testament to her unwavering love and understanding. As minutes stretched into hours, I found myself replaying moments from my childhood, the innocence shattered by Mrs. Thompson's betrayal, the fear that had silenced me for years, and the aftermath of attempting to bury the trauma deep within. Each memory was a jagged piece of a puzzle I had spent years trying to forget, now brought vividly to life by the triggering scenes of the show. The realization hit me with a pang of regret. I had pushed aside my own pain for so long, believing it was easier to carry the burden alone than to confront the painful truths of my past. But now, standing on the precipice of honesty with Emily, I questioned whether I had made the right choice. Had I been selfish in seeking solace in her arms, or was it an act of desperation to finally shed the weight of silence? Lost in contemplation, I heard a soft knock on the bedroom door, and Emily's voice, filled with concern, pierced through the haze of my thoughts. "Alex, can I come in?" she asked gently, her tone a delicate balance of respect for my need for space and her desire to comfort me. I hesitated, torn between the comfort of solitude and the yearning for Emily's presence. With a deep breath, I opened the door, finding her standing there, her eyes soft with understanding. Without a word, she crossed the room and enveloped me in her arms once more, holding me close as if to shield me from the weight of my own memories. "I'm sorry," I whispered against her shoulder, the words heavy with remorse. "I didn't mean to burden you with all of this." Emily pulled back slightly, her hands framing my face as she met my gaze with unwavering sincerity. "Alex, you're not burdening me," she said firmly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "I want to be here for you, through the good times and the bad. Your pain is mine too now, and we'll face it together." Her words were a lifeline in the storm of my doubts, grounding me in the reality of our shared love and commitment. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. A belief that maybe, just maybe, my past didn't have to define our future. Emily's unwavering support offered me the courage to confront the demons I had long kept at bay, knowing that she would be there every step of the way. As we stood there in the quiet embrace of our bedroom, the weight of my confession began to lift. Emily's presence became a source of strength, A reminder that I wasn't alone in my struggle. Together, we would navigate the complexities of my trauma, forging a path toward healing and understanding. I thought my wife understood me. But no. She was still affected and changed after I told her about my traumatic past. The days following my confession to Emily brought subtle, yet noticeable changes in our relationship. It was as if my words had cast a shadow over us, one that neither of us could ignore but both struggled to address. Our once effortless intimacy now felt tentative, our conversations laced with unspoken fears and uncertainties. Emily tried to maintain our routines, but I could sense a shift in her demeanor. She seemed more reserved, her touches less frequent, and more hesitant. In the past, we would cuddle on the couch, her head resting comfortably on my shoulder. Now, she sat a bit further away, her body language reflecting an invisible barrier that had sprung up between us. One evening, as we sat together watching a movie, I noticed her glancing at me more often, her eyes filled with concern. I reached out to hold her hand, hoping to bridge the gap, but she flinched slightly before intertwining her fingers with mine. The momentary hesitation stung, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, squeezing her hand for reassurance. Emily forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired," she replied, her voice lacking its usual warmth. "Work has been really stressful." I nodded, not wanting to press further but feeling the weight of her words. The truth was, I felt tired too. Tired of the distance, the tension, and the uncertainty that now colored our interactions. As days turned into weeks, the strain between us grew more palpable. We spoke less about our feelings and more about mundane topics, avoiding anything that might dredge up the pain we were both grappling with. Our once lively dinner conversations became silent affairs, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery and the hum of the kitchen appliances. No more kisses when I came back from work and no more initiating anything intimate from her side. She wasn't mean or anything, but I felt like something was bothering her. I tried to apologize for maybe making her uncomfortable, but she would just claim there was nothing bothering her and I was just being paranoid. Each day seemed to bring a new layer of tension. Emily's once vibrant laughter became rarer, her smiles more subdued. We went through the motions of daily life, cooking dinner, watching TV, going to bed. Yet it felt as if we were merely actors playing our parts, disconnected from the true essence of our relationship. Emily often retreated to the bedroom earlier than usual, citing fatigue. I would follow her shortly after, lying next to her in silence, the chasm between us growing with each passing night. I missed the spontaneous moments of intimacy we used to share, the small gestures of affection that had once been so natural and comforting. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the silence between us felt suffocating. I decided to address the elephant in the room. "Emily, I feel like we're drifting apart," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I miss the way we used to be." She looked up from her plate, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "I'm trying, Alex," she replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But it's hard. It's hard to know how to act, what to say. I don't want to make things worse." Her words cut deep, amplifying the guilt I already felt. "I don't want you to feel like you have to walk on eggshells around me," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We need to find a way to navigate this together." Emily squeezed my hand, but her eyes remained distant. "I know," she said softly. "I just need time." Despite our efforts to address the distance, the unease continued to grow. I began to notice small things that fueled my anxiety. Emily spending more time on her phone, her responses becoming more curt and mechanical. She seemed lost in her thoughts, often staring off into space, her mind miles away. One weekend I suggested we go for a hike, hoping that some fresh air and time away from the house might help us reconnect. Emily agreed, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. As we walked through the forest trails, the natural beauty around us felt like a stark contrast to the turmoil within. "Do you remember our first hike together?" I asked, trying to spark a memory that might bring us closer. "We got lost and ended up finding that beautiful waterfall." Emily smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, I remember," she said. "That was a good day." I longed for the warmth of that memory, the ease with which we had navigated our adventures together. But now, it felt like we were both lost in a different kind of wilderness, one where the path forward was obscured by the shadows of my past and the uncertainty of our future. The tension finally came to a head one evening over something as mundane as taking out the trash. It was a simple chore, one that we usually shared without issue. But that night, the simmering frustration boiled over. "Why didn't you take out the trash like you said you would?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emily's response was sharp, her eyes flashing with anger. "I forgot, okay? It's not the end of the world." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. It's not about the trash, Emily. It's about the fact that you said you would do it and then you didn't. It's like you don't care anymore. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the hurt and anger boiling beneath the surface. Don't you dare accuse me of not caring, she snapped. I've been doing everything I can to support you, but it's never enough, is it? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That's not fair, I said, my voice rising. I never asked you to. At least I'm not lying about being raped, you fucking narcissist, she spat out, her face contorted with rage. I stood there, stunned into silence. The room seemed to spin around me, her words echoing in my mind. I couldn't process what had just come out of her mouth. The air between us crackled with the intensity of her anger, and I felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. Emily's eyes widened as she realized what she had said. Alex, I didn't mean, she began, her voice trembling. But I couldn't listen. The hurt and betrayal were too overwhelming. I turned on my heel, storming out of the room and slamming the door behind me. The walls seemed to close in on me as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I retreated to the sanctuary of our bedroom, seeking refuge in the solitude that provided a brief respite from the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. Emily lingered in the doorway, a silent sentinel of support. As I paced the length of the room, I grappled with the overwhelming turmoil that threatened to consume me. A flood of emotions unleashed by the unexpected trigger of our argument. In the quiet of the night, I found myself reflecting on the sequence of events that had unfolded. The innocuous television show, the resurgence of memories long buried, and the fragile facade of control that had shattered with startling swiftness. Guilt gnawed at my conscience like a relentless predator, whispering accusations of weakness and inadequacy. How could I burden Emily with the weight of my past? Was it fair to disrupt our tranquil life together with the storm of my unresolved trauma? I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to steady my breathing. Emily's words echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the rift that had formed between us. I wanted to believe that she didn't mean what she had said, that it was a moment of anger and frustration. But the sting of her accusation cut deep, amplifying the insecurities I had battled for so long. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Emily stood there, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She approached cautiously, as if afraid to shatter the fragile truce that had settled over us. Alex, she began, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. I was angry and I lashed out. Please, believe me. I looked up at her, my eyes filled with hurt and confusion. Why did you say it then? How could you use my trauma against me like that? Emily's shoulders sagged, and she sank to the floor in front of me, her tears falling freely. I don't know, she whispered. I was angry and frustrated, and I said something I didn't mean. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I couldn't hear her. The betrayal and shock were too overwhelming. The very person I had confided in, the one I trusted with my deepest, darkest secret, had weaponized my trauma against me in a moment of anger. My vision blurred with tears, and I could feel my hands trembling. How could you? I whispered, my voice breaking. How could you say that to me? Emily reached out, but I recoiled, unable to bear her touch. Alex, please, I'm so sorry, she pleaded, her own eyes brimming with tears. I didn't mean it. I was angry and frustrated. Please, believe me. But the damage was done. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it did little to soothe the pain that now coursed through me. The weight of her words crushed me, each syllable a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. Unable to stay in the same room, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the walls of our home closing in on me. I needed to get away, to put some distance between us before I said something I might regret. Alex, wait, Emily cried, but I was already moving toward the door, driven by a desperate need to escape the suffocating tension. I grabbed my coat and keys, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The cool night air hit me like a shock as I stepped outside, but it did little to calm the storm raging within. I could hear Emily calling after me, her voice filled with desperation, but I kept walking, unable to face her after what she had said. I made my way to my car and slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I tried to steady my breathing. The pain and betrayal were overwhelming, a torrent of emotions that I couldn't contain. I sat there for a moment, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. The memories of our argument replayed in my mind, each exchange more painful than the last. Emily's face, twisted in anger, her words cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. The realization that she had used my trauma against me, even in a moment of rage, was almost too much to bear. I started the car and drove aimlessly, the darkened streets offering a temporary reprieve from the chaos in my mind. I needed to clear my head, to find some semblance of calm amidst the turmoil. My thoughts kept circling back to the same painful truth. The woman I loved, the one person I thought understood me, had betrayed my trust in the most hurtful way possible. Eventually, I found myself parked at a small secluded park on the edge of town. It was a place I had often gone to when I needed to think, to escape the pressures of everyday life. I got out of the car and walked to a bench near the lake, the stillness of the water mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. I sat down, my head in my hands, as the enormity of what had happened washed over me. The quiet of the night provided a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within me. I felt a sense of isolation, a loneliness that gnawed at my soul. As I sat there, I found myself reflecting on the sequence of events that had led to this moment. The innocuous television show that had triggered a flood of painful memories, the fragile facade of control that had shattered so easily, and now, the harsh reality of Emily's words cutting through the last remnants of my emotional defenses. Guilt and self-doubt gnawed at me, whispering accusations of weakness and inadequacy. How could I have let things get this far? Was it fair to burden Emily with the weight of my past? The questions circled in my mind, relentless and unforgiving. Sitting there for a while, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me, I realized I needed to escape the oppressive atmosphere of our home. The words Emily had thrown at me during our argument still echoed painfully in my mind. The betrayal, the shock, and the hurt were overwhelming, and I needed space to breathe, to think, and to figure out my next steps. I decided to drive to my friend Tom's house. Tom and I had been close since college, and he had always been a steady and supportive presence in my life. I hoped that being around someone who knew me well would provide some clarity, or at least a temporary reprieve from the chaos. As I pulled into his driveway, a mix of relief and dread washed over me. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up about everything that had happened. Entering Tom's home brought a sense of comfort. It was familiar, filled with the memories of countless late-night conversations, shared laughs, and mutual support. The cozy interior, with its well-worn furniture and the faint smell of coffee, felt like a safe haven. I settled into the spare room, the same room I had stayed in during previous visits, and tried to calm the storm raging inside me. Lying on the couch that night, sleep was elusive. My mind was a relentless loop of thoughts about Emily, about our past, and about the hurtful words she had said. The sense of betrayal was raw and fresh. Emily had tried calling me multiple times since I left. Each time my phone buzzed with her name, I felt a sharp pang of guilt and pain. Despite the deep connection we shared, I couldn't bring myself to answer. The wound was too fresh, and the hurt too raw. Eventually I blocked her number, needing to protect my own fragile emotional state. The next morning, I found myself at Tom's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and staring blankly ahead. My thoughts kept circling back to the argument, to Emily's words, and to the sense of abandonment that now hung over me. I knew I had likely hurt her by leaving, by blocking her calls and messages, but I couldn't face her anger and disappointment on top of my own pain. Emily's messages, which I saw before blocking her, were filled with a mix of anger and desperation. She accused me of abandoning her, of not acknowledging all the good she had done for me. She reminded me of the times she had supported me, had shared her life and love with me, and now, in her eyes, I was the one leaving her behind. Her words stung. There was truth in them, but there was also a deep misunderstanding. Yes, Emily had been there for me in many ways, but her recent behavior, the hurtful things she had said, had created a chasm between us that I didn't know how to bridge. It was clear that she was struggling too, that she felt overwhelmed by the weight of my past and the burden of supporting me through my trauma. But instead of acknowledging her own struggles, she seemed to blame me for all our problems. I knew I might have trauma dumped on her, overwhelmed her with the weight of my unresolved past. I understood that it was a lot for anyone to handle, especially someone who loved me and wanted to help. But I had hoped for some form of acknowledgement, some support that went beyond the initial empathy she had shown. Instead, I felt more isolated and alone than ever. In the solitude of Tom's house, I tried to make sense of my feelings. I felt guilty for leaving Emily, for blocking her, for not facing her anger and disappointment. But I also felt a deep sense of betrayal. The woman I loved, the one person I thought understood me, had used my deepest pain against me in a moment of anger. The trust we had built over 6 years felt shattered, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. During the days I spent at Tom's house, I did a lot of soul searching. I reflected on my relationship with Emily, on the good times and the bad, and on the deep love we shared. I thought about the countless moments of joy, of shared dreams and plans for the future. But I also couldn't ignore the pain of our recent interactions, the distance that had grown between us, and the harsh words she had thrown at me. I had seen 2 therapists in the past, but neither seemed to help much. They had scratched the surface of my trauma, but the deep wounds remained, festering and unresolved. I knew I needed help, But finding the right therapist, someone who truly understood the depth of my pain, felt like an insurmountable task. The idea of divorce kept gnawing at me. My gut told me to leave, to protect myself from further hurt and betrayal. But my heart resisted. Emily was genuinely the love of my life. Despite everything, I still loved her deeply. The thought of throwing away 6 years of our lives together because of one moment of anger and hurt didn't sit right with me. I was caught in a painful limbo, torn between the urge to protect myself and the desire to salvage what we had built together. I spent hours sitting by the lake near Tom's house, a place that had always brought me a sense of peace. The calm water and the gentle rustling of leaves provided a backdrop for my internal struggle. I thought about the times Emily had supported me, the ways she had shown her love and care. I remembered the laughter, the shared adventures, and the quiet moments of intimacy that had defined our relationship. But alongside those memories were the recent arguments, the distance that had grown between us, and the devastating impact of her hurtful words. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, a wound that cut to the core of my being. The woman I trusted most had turned my pain against me, and I didn't know how to move past that. I thought about the support I needed, the acknowledgement of my pain that I craved. I realized that while Emily had tried to be there for me, she was also dealing with her own struggles. Her frustration and anger were signs that she was overwhelmed, that she didn't know how to handle the weight of my trauma. I had expected her to be strong for both of us, but that wasn't fair. She was only human, with her own limits and vulnerabilities. Tom suggested I try therapy again, to find someone who could help me work through my trauma and the recent events with Emily. At first I resisted. My previous experiences with therapy had left me feeling more isolated and misunderstood. But as I sat by the lake, reflecting on my options, I realized that I couldn't do this alone. I needed professional help to navigate the complex emotions and the deep wounds that had resurfaced. Finding the right therapist would take time and effort, but it was a step I needed to take. I couldn't keep running from my pain or expecting Emily to carry the burden for me. I needed to face my trauma head on, to work through it in a way that would allow me to heal and rebuild my life. After a few contemplative days at Tom's house, I found a semblance of clarity amid the solitude and reflection. The quiet, punctuated only by the occasional chirp of birds or the rustling of leaves, provided the perfect backdrop for my thoughts to settle. It became increasingly evident that avoiding Emily was not a viable long-term solution. The unresolved tension and lingering pain from our last encounter loomed over me like a dark cloud, impossible to ignore. We needed to address our issues directly and find a resolution, no matter how difficult the conversation might be. Determined to make amends, I took a deep breath and unblocked Emily's number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed out a message. "We need to talk. Can we meet somewhere neutral?" My heart pounded as I hit send, anxiety mixing with a sliver of hope. To my surprise, Emily responded almost immediately. She suggested we meet at her parents' house, emphasizing that it was a safe and familiar place for both of us. I hesitated but eventually agreed. The need to clear the air and understand where we stood outweighed my reservations. As I made my way to her parents' house, the familiar streets brought back a flood of memories. Each turn seemed to echo with fragments of our past. Laughter, shared secrets, moments of joy, and now, the shadow of our unresolved conflict. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, growing stronger with each step closer to the house. The once welcoming home now loomed before me, its walls holding the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. I parked the car and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The garden, meticulously maintained, was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The path to the front door seemed longer than usual, each step a reminder of the emotional journey I was embarking on. When I finally reached the door, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorbell. With a final deep breath, I rang the bell. The sound echoed inside, and moments later, the door opened to reveal Emily. She looked just as conflicted as I felt, her eyes reflecting a mixture of apprehension and determination. We exchanged awkward pleasantries before making our way to the living room. The familiarity of the surroundings did little to ease the tension. As I stepped into the living room, I was greeted not only by Emily, but also by our parents. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and it was immediately apparent that this was not going to be the private conversation I had anticipated. My heart sank as I realized that Emily had called both of our parents to be present. The intimate and traumatic details of my past, which I had shared with Emily in confidence, were now laid bare for everyone to scrutinize. The familiar surroundings did little to comfort me. The furniture was arranged as it always had been, the scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and family photos adorned the walls, capturing moments of joy and togetherness. Yet despite the warmth of the setting, an icy chill ran down my spine. The eyes of everyone in the room were on me, and I felt my face flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. The private, painful details of my life, things I had only ever whispered to Emily in the dead of night, were now a topic of discussion among people who had no right to that knowledge. My parents, sitting stiffly on the couch, exchanged worried glances. They had always dismissed my past trauma as an exaggeration, a cry for attention. Their expressions now were a mix of disbelief and unease, as if they were struggling to reconcile the gravity of my words with their long-held dismissals. Emily's parents, on the other hand, looked at me with a mix of pity and concern. Their eyes were soft, their postures slightly leaned towards me as if to offer silent support. This only heightened my discomfort. Pity was the last thing I wanted. It felt condescending, a reminder of my vulnerability laid bare in such a public manner. I stood there, feeling exposed and betrayed. Emily's eyes met mine, and I saw a glimmer of regret. But the damage was done. She had breached the trust I had placed in her by involving our families in what should have been a private matter. My mind raced, trying to process the situation. My parents' dismissive attitudes from the past flooded back to me. Memories of their disbelief and my resulting isolation making my blood boil. "I thought we were going to talk privately," I said, my voice trembling with a barely contained mix of hurt and anger. Emily took a step forward, her face full of remorse. "I thought it would help if everyone knew. If we could all support you together," she explained, her voice soft and pleading. "You had no right," I snapped, unable to contain my frustration. "This was between us." My father, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Son, if there's something you want to tell us, we're here to listen," he said, his tone surprisingly gentle but laced with the same skepticism that had always been there. I looked at him, then at my mother, who was nodding in agreement, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and disbelief. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing closer as the weight of their stares bore down. I felt like a child again, desperately trying to make them understand something they were unwilling or unable to grasp. Emily's mother interjected, her voice soothing. "We just want to help, dear. No one is here to judge you." But I did feel judged, and more than that, I felt betrayed. I had come here to find some resolution with Emily, not to have my past trauma turned into a family intervention. The anger and embarrassment were overwhelming, and I struggled to find the right words to convey the depth of my betrayal. Taking a deep breath, I finally spoke, my voice shaking but firm. "I appreciate that you all want to help, but this isn't the way to do it. My past is my own, and I decide who I share it with. This conversation was supposed to be between Emily and me." The silence that followed was heavy, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Emily's eyes filled with tears and my parents exchanged another glance, this time tinged with a bit more understanding. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. But trust is fragile. And right now, it's shattered." Emily began to speak, her voice wavering as she tried to justify her actions. "I thought involving our parents was necessary," she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. "We needed mediation, someone to help us find a resolution." Her words felt like a dagger to my heart. To me, it felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. The trauma I had buried for so long, the painful memories I had shared with her in the most vulnerable moments, were now exposed, turned into a spectacle for others to judge and dissect. I glanced around the room, my gaze landing on my second cousin, who stood awkwardly in the corner. He had also been informed and invited, a further reminder of the extent of Emily's breach of trust. His presence was a stark indication of how far-reaching this situation had become. The room was thick with tension, the kind that makes the air heavy and every breath feel laborious. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. My second cousin shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he were anywhere but here. The awkwardness and discomfort were palpable, radiating from everyone present. "I thought," I continued, struggling to keep my voice steady, "that you were someone I could trust. I confided in you because I believed you understood me, that you would protect my secrets. Instead, you've turned them into a public spectacle." My father cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We didn't realize the extent of what you went through," he admitted, his eyes softening slightly. "But involving everyone like this, it doesn't seem right." Emily's father nodded in agreement. "Maybe we should give you two some space to talk this through privately." I shook my head, the anger and hurt too overwhelming. "It's too late for that now. The damage is done." Emily's tears flowed freely now, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." As the conversation swirled around me, a cacophony of voices and opinions blending into an overwhelming noise, I felt a growing sense of detachment. The room, once filled with familiar faces, now seemed foreign and hostile. The trust and love I had once felt for Emily seemed to evaporate in the face of this public humiliation. She had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. Involving our families in such a deeply personal matter was not just a breach of trust but also a clear indication of her lack of sophistication and sympathy. I sat there, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions, the noise around me fading into a dull hum. My gaze fixed on Emily, who was still attempting to justify her actions, her eyes wide with desperation and regret. But her words were lost on me, drowned out by the roar of my anger and sorrow. Each word she spoke felt like another blow, deepening the chasm between us. Finally, I could take no more. I stood up abruptly, cutting through the ongoing conversation like a knife. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. My voice was steady, though inside I was trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I can't do this anymore," I announced, looking directly at Emily. Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "I can't be with someone who would betray my trust and use my past as a weapon. I'm filing for divorce." The words hung heavily in the air, their finality unmistakable. Emily's face went pale, and a murmur of shock rippled through the room. My parents, sitting to my right, looked at me with a mixture of shock and concern, their expressions pleading for me to reconsider. They tried to speak, but I raised a hand to silence them, my resolve unshaken. "This is not up for discussion," I continued, my voice firm. "I've made my decision." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she tried to respond. "Please, don't do this," she begged. "I was only trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, incredulous. "You call this help? You turned my deepest pain into a public spectacle. You betrayed me, Emily. There's no coming back from that." The room remained silent, the weight of my words pressing down on everyone present. Emily's parents exchanged a worried glance, their faces etched with concern and helplessness. My second cousin, still standing awkwardly in the corner, looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. My mother finally found her voice, her tone soft and pleading. "Please, let's not rush into anything. We can work through this as a family." I shook my head, the pain and betrayal too fresh, too overwhelming. "This isn't something that can be fixed," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "The trust is gone." Turning to leave, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain and filled with pain, but staying would only deepen the wounds. As I walked towards the door, Emily called out one last time, her voice choked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and took a deep breath. Without turning around, I replied, "Sorry isn't enough." And with that, I stepped out of the room, leaving behind a whirlwind of emotions and a marriage shattered beyond repair. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the events over and over. The betrayal, the humiliation, the final decision to walk away, it all felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But as I pulled into my driveway, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had made my choice, and now, I had to face the consequences and begin the painful process of healing. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and legal proceedings. My parents tried to reach out, their concern evident, but I kept them at arm's length, needing time to process everything on my own. Emily made several attempts to contact me, her messages filled with regret and pleas for another chance. But my decision was firm. The trust was broken, and there was no going back. As the weeks turned into months, the pain slowly began to dull, replaced by a sense of acceptance. I threw myself into work and leaned on friends who offered support and understanding. The journey to healing was long and arduous, but each day brought a small measure of progress. And in time I found a new sense of strength and resilience, determined to move forward and rebuild my life on my own terms. The 6 years Emily and I had spent together, the love we had shared, were now overshadowed by this moment of betrayal. Each step away from the front door felt heavier than the last, as memories of our time together flooded my mind. The laughter, the shared dreams, the silent moments of comfort, they all seemed tainted now. As I drove away, the reality of the situation began to sink in. I thought about the future and what it would look like without Emily by my side. Living a fake life, pretending that everything was okay, was not an option for me. I needed authenticity, honesty, and respect in my relationships. Emily had shown that she was incapable of providing that. The decision to divorce was painful, but it was the right one. Our feelings for each other, once passionate and genuine, had been irreparably damaged. It was time to close this chapter of my life and start anew. The drive was long and quiet, giving me plenty of time to reflect. The scenery outside the window changed from familiar suburban streets to open highways, mirroring the transition I was making in my own life. I thought about the person I used to be before Emily and I met, and the person I wanted to become now. The future seemed daunting, but also full of possibilities. In the days that followed, I began the process of filing for divorce. It was a whirlwind of legal documents and meetings with attorneys, each step solidifying the end of our marriage. I moved my things out of the house we had shared, carefully packing away the remnants of our life together. The once cozy home now felt like a museum of memories, each room holding echoes of the past. I found solace in the support of friends like Tom, who offered a listening ear and a place to stay while I figured out my next steps. Avoiding contact with Emily and our families was crucial for my healing. Every phone call, every message felt like a reopening of wounds that were just beginning to close. I needed time and space to process everything, to mourn the end of our relationship, and to rebuild my sense of self. The decision to end our marriage was met with mixed reactions. Some friends and family members understood and supported me, recognizing the gravity of Emily's betrayal. Others questioned whether I was making the right choice, suggesting that perhaps we could still work things out. But deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't continue to live a lie, to pretend that everything was fine when it was far from it. Tom was a constant source of support during this time. He would often invite me over for dinner or just to hang out, helping to distract me from the turmoil of the divorce proceedings. One evening, as we sat on his porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "You know, this isn't the end. It's just a new beginning. You've got a whole life ahead of you, and you get to decide what that looks like." His words resonated with me. Slowly, I began to see the divorce not as a failure, but as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. I also started to reconnect with old hobbies and interests that I had neglected during my marriage. Photography, which had always been a passion of mine, became a therapeutic outlet. Capturing the beauty of the world through my lens helped me see the beauty in my own journey of healing. I also sought professional help, seeing a therapist who helped me navigate the complex emotions I was experiencing. She guided me through the process of understanding my feelings, validating my pain, and helping me find ways to cope and move forward. Through our sessions, I began to regain a sense of control over my life and my future. Gradually, I started to envision a new life for myself. One filled with honesty, respect, and genuine connections. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be moments of doubt and loneliness. But I was determined to build a future that was true to who I was. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Emily would always be a part of my past, a chapter in my story that had shaped me in many ways. But as I moved forward, I was determined to write new chapters, ones filled with growth, healing, and the promise of better days ahead. My wife is pregnant with our first child, and her sister has hinted that she wants to sleep with me. How should I tell my wife? My name is Jason, and at 24, I consider myself incredibly fortunate. I met the love of my life, Emily, 3 years ago, and every day since then has been a testament to the power of love and commitment. Emily, also 24, is my rock, my confidant, and my best friend. Our journey together has been nothing short of extraordinary, filled with moments of joy, challenges, and unwavering support for each other. We first crossed paths at a mutual friend's birthday party. I still remember seeing her for the first time, her radiant smile lighting up the room. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and discovering a mutual passion for travel and adventure. It felt as though we had known each other for years. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again, and thankfully, she felt the same way. Our relationship blossomed quickly. We spent our weekends exploring new places, trying out new cuisines, and sharing our dreams and aspirations. Emily's warmth and kindness made everyone around her feel at ease, and I was no exception. She was studying to become a nurse, driven by a desire to help others, while I was working in software development, enjoying the challenges and creativity the field offered. After 2 years of dating, I proposed to Emily during a sunset hike, one of our favorite activities. The moment was perfect, and she said yes, tears of joy in her eyes. We married 6 months ago in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Emily's younger sister, Sarah, who is 21, was her maid of honor. The bond between Emily and Sarah is incredibly strong. They have always been there for each other, sharing secrets, dreams, and an unbreakable sisterly love. Sarah, like Emily, is a wonderful person. She is currently in college, pursuing a degree in psychology. With her bubbly personality and compassionate nature, she has always been the life of any family gathering. Growing up, the two sisters were inseparable. Their parents often joked that they share a secret language, a testament to their close-knit relationship. It was no surprise that Sarah played a significant role in our wedding, helping to ensure everything was perfect for her sister's big day. The wedding day was magical. Emily looked stunning in her white dress, her smile more radiant than ever. As we exchanged vows, promising to support and love each other through all of life's challenges, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Sarah's speech brought everyone to tears as she reminisced about their childhood and expressed her happiness for us. Life after the wedding has been a blissful continuation of our journey together. We moved into a cozy apartment, decorated with mementos from our travels and our shared experiences. Emily's presence makes every day brighter. Her laughter is infectious, and her ability to find joy in the smallest things constantly amazes me. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Emily had been feeling unusually tired and queasy for a few weeks. She had been brushing it off as stress from work, but there was a lingering suspicion that there might be something more. We decided to take a pregnancy test to put our minds at ease. I remember pacing around the living room, my heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. Emily came out of the bathroom, holding the test with trembling hands. She looked at me with wide, hopeful eyes, and then, with a tearful smile, she whispered, "Jason, it's positive. We're going to have a baby." The world seemed to stand still for a moment as the words sank in. I rushed to her side, wrapping her in a tight embrace. Tears of joy streamed down our faces as we held each other, overwhelmed with happiness. The realization that we were about to embark on this incredible journey together filled my heart with an indescribable sense of love and excitement. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and planning. We decided to share the news with our families during a Sunday dinner at Emily's parents' house. As we gathered around the dining table, I could barely contain my excitement. Emily and I exchanged a knowing glance, and she stood up, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "We have some exciting news to share with everyone," she began. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Jason and I are going to be parents. We're expecting a baby." For a moment there was stunned silence, and then the room erupted in cheers and applause. Emily's mother burst into tears, hugging both of us tightly. Her father clapped me on the back, his eyes shining with pride. Sarah, Emily's younger sister, jumped up from her seat, squealing with delight. She rushed over to Emily, wrapping her arms around her sister and exclaiming, "I'm going to be an aunt. I can't believe it." The rest of the evening was filled with joyous celebration. We toasted to the future, shared stories and laughter, and basked in the collective happiness of our family. Emily and I couldn't stop smiling, our hands intertwined under the table. The love and support from our families meant the world to us, and it reinforced just how blessed we were to have such a strong network as we embarked on this new chapter of our lives. Over the following weeks, our excitement only grew. We started making plans for the nursery, picking out baby names and reading every parenting book we could get our hands on. Each night as we lay in bed, we would talk about our hopes and dreams for our child, imagining the life we would build together. Emily's eyes would light up as she talked about all the things she wanted to teach our baby, from baking cookies to exploring nature. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and it made me fall in love with her all over again. My love for Emily deepened with each passing day. Seeing her face light up as she felt the first fluttering movements of our baby made my heart swell with pride. I marveled at her strength and grace as she navigated the changes in her body, always with a smile and a kind word. I was in awe of her, and I was determined to support her every step of the way. We spent countless hours preparing for the arrival of our little one. Our weekends were filled with trips to baby stores, comparing cribs and car seats, and picking out tiny outfits. We painted the nursery together, choosing a soft, calming palette of blues and greens. Each stroke of the brush was a promise of the love and care we would pour into our child's life. We hung pictures of animals and nature on the walls, imagining the day our baby would gaze up at them with wonder. Our families were equally enthusiastic. Emily's parents offered to help with anything we needed, from babysitting to setting up the nursery. Sarah was particularly excited, often stopping by with baby books and tiny clothes she couldn't resist buying. Her excitement was contagious, and it warmed my heart to see how much she already loved our unborn child. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, I found myself more in awe of her than ever. Her strength, resilience, and unwavering positivity were inspiring. I made it my mission to be the best partner I could be, attending every doctor's appointment, cooking her favorite meals, and making sure she felt loved and supported. I knew this journey was as much about taking care of her as it was about preparing for our baby. One of my favorite moments was when we went for the first ultrasound. Seeing the tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen brought tears to my eyes. It was a tangible reminder of the life we had created together, a symbol of our love and commitment. I held Emily's hand tightly, both of us mesmerized by the sight of our baby. It was a moment of pure joy and connection, one that I would carry with me forever. It was a typical Monday morning, and I was sitting in my home office catching up on some work emails. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner and the occasional sound of birds chirping outside. Emily had just left for her prenatal checkup, and I was planning to join her at the clinic later. My phone buzzed on the desk, breaking my concentration. I glanced at the screen and saw a message notification from Sarah, Emily's younger sister. I picked up my phone, smiling as I unlocked it. Sarah often texted me about random things, funny memes, family updates, or questions about Emily's preferences. But nothing could have prepared me for the text I was about to read. Hey Jason, I know this might sound weird, but I just wanted to let you know that if you ever need someone to talk to, or anything else during Emily's pregnancy, I'm here for you. I know it can be tough, and sometimes women get emotionally and physically distant. So, I'm here to help you out, sexually or emotionally, anytime. Just think about it. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process the words. At first, I thought it must be some kind of joke, a terrible prank. I read the message again, hoping I had misunderstood. But there it was, plain as day, Sarah offering herself to me in a way that was both shocking and utterly inappropriate. A wave of confusion and disbelief washed over me. How could Sarah, someone I considered almost like a sister, send such a message? My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands felt clammy as I set the phone down. I rubbed my temples, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this some twisted way of helping, or did she actually have feelings for me? I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me, anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep sense of unease. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, each one more troubling than the last. I couldn't fathom what had led Sarah to think this was acceptable or how she could be so willing to betray her sister, especially now when Emily needed support the most. The first thing that came to mind was Emily. She had always been incredibly close to Sarah. They shared everything, from childhood secrets to their dreams for the future. The bond they had was something I admired and respected. How could I tell Emily about this without shattering that bond? The thought of her pain and betrayal made my chest tighten with dread. I picked up my phone again, rereading the message, hoping I could find some hidden context that would make it all make sense. But it was as clear as it was disturbing. My immediate reaction was to delete it, pretend it never happened, but I knew that wasn't an option. This was something that needed to be addressed, no matter how uncomfortable or painful it might be. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I stepped outside, the warm sun and fresh air did little to calm my racing thoughts. I walked aimlessly, my mind consumed by the dilemma. If I told Emily, it would devastate her. She was already dealing with the physical and emotional challenges of pregnancy. Adding this betrayal to the mix felt cruel and unfair. But keeping it from her wasn't an option either. I couldn't let her remain close to someone who would so easily undermine her trust. As I walked, I considered my options. I could confront Sarah directly, demanding an explanation and warning her to never approach me like that again. But what if she denied it or twisted the story? I needed to be careful, to ensure that whatever happened next was handled with the utmost care and consideration for Emily's well-being. I sat down on a park bench, taking deep breaths to steady myself. I thought about calling a friend for advice but dismissed the idea. This was too personal, too sensitive to involve anyone else. I needed to figure this out on my own. My priority was clear: protecting Emily and our unborn child. But how to do that without causing more harm was the real challenge. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to talk to Sarah first. I needed to understand her motives, to make her see the gravity of her actions. Maybe she didn't fully grasp the impact of what she was suggesting. Perhaps there was a way to address this without destroying the relationship between the sisters. With a plan forming in my mind, I headed back home. The walk had helped clear my thoughts, but the knot of anxiety in my stomach remained. As I reached our front door, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for the confrontation. I typed out a message to Sarah, keeping it as neutral as possible. Hey Sarah, can we talk? I got your message, and I think we need to clear some things up. Let's meet for coffee later today. I hit send and waited, my heart pounding. Within minutes, Sarah replied, agreeing to meet at a nearby cafe in an hour. I spent the next 60 minutes pacing the living room, rehearsing what I would say, and trying to anticipate her reactions. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but I knew I had to stay calm and collected. At the cafe, I arrived early and chose a quiet corner table, away from prying eyes and ears. When Sarah walked in, she looked cheerful, almost oblivious to the storm her message had caused. She sat down across from me, her smile faltering slightly when she saw the seriousness in my expression. Sarah, we need to talk about the message you sent me this morning, I began, my voice steady but firm. I need to understand why you would say something like that. Her eyes widened, and she seemed to shrink into her seat. Jason, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I thought you might need someone to talk to, and I didn't want you to feel alone. I shook my head, trying to keep my frustration in check. Offering to be there for emotional support is one thing, but what you suggested goes way beyond that. It's completely inappropriate, and it feels like a betrayal to Emily. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought I could help. Help? By suggesting we sleep together? I asked incredulously. Sarah, this isn't just about me. It's about Emily, too. How do you think she would feel if she knew? Sarah's face crumpled, and she started to cry. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I care about you both so much, and I thought maybe I could be there for you in ways she can't right now. I sighed, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Look, Sarah, I get that you care about us, but this isn't the way to show it. You need to understand that what you did was wrong. Emily is your sister, and she trusts you. We all need to support each other, especially now. Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. You're right. I'm so sorry, Jason. I promise I won't ever say anything like that again. Please don't tell Emily. It would break her heart. I looked at her, struggling with my own emotions. I'll think about it, but I can't promise anything. My first priority is Emily and our baby. You need to understand that. As I walked back home, my mind was still in turmoil. I had confronted Sarah, but the dilemma remained. Should I tell Emily and risk shattering her relationship with her sister, or should I keep it to myself and hope Sarah never crossed that line again? The weight of the decision pressed heavily on me, and I knew there was no easy answer. My love and dedication to Emily and our unborn child would guide me, but the path forward was fraught with uncertainty and pain. I refused to have anal sex with my boyfriend, so he turned to watching explicit videos of his ex-girlfriend instead. My name is Emily, and I'm a 34-year-old woman currently in a relationship with a wonderful, albeit slightly younger man named Alex, who is 21. We have been together for about 5 months now. I met Alex in a somewhat unexpected way. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had decided to unwind after a long day at work by visiting a local coffee shop. I usually spent my evenings there, catching up on some reading or working on my personal projects. The coffee shop had a cozy, inviting atmosphere, with soft jazz music playing in the background and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As I sat in my usual corner, engrossed in a book, I noticed Alex at the counter. He was hard to miss, with his tall athletic build, and an infectious smile that seemed to light up the room. He looked a bit out of place among the usual patrons, most of whom were around my age or older. He approached the counter with an air of confidence and ordered his drink. As he waited, our eyes met, and he gave me a friendly nod. A few moments later, he was looking around for a place to sit, and since the shop was unusually crowded that evening, he approached my table with a polite, "Mind if I join you?" I agreed, and we struck up a conversation. What was meant to be a brief chat over coffee turned into a deep, engaging discussion that lasted for hours. We talked about everything from our favorite books and movies to our hopes and dreams. From that day on, Alex and I were inseparable. He had a youthful exuberance and a zest for life that was refreshing. Despite our age difference, we found common ground in our interests and values. Alex was studying computer science and was passionate about technology and innovation, while I worked in marketing, enjoying the creative and strategic aspects of my job. Our conversations were always stimulating, and we learned a lot from each other. Alex's positivity was contagious. He had a way of seeing the bright side of things, which was a refreshing change from my more pragmatic, sometimes cynical outlook. He was adventurous and spontaneous, often surprising me with impromptu dates or weekend getaways. One weekend, he whisked me away to a secluded cabin in the mountains, where we spent our time hiking, cooking together, and stargazing. It was magical and cemented the strong connection we felt. Our days were filled with joy and laughter. Alex had a way of making even the mundane tasks feel special. Whether we were cooking dinner together, taking long walks in the park, or simply lounging on the couch watching movies, every moment felt cherished. Alex was attentive and affectionate, always finding little ways to show he cared. He would leave sweet notes for me to find in the morning, bring me my favorite flowers for no reason, and always made sure to remind me how beautiful and special I was to him. We also had a great social life. Alex introduced me to his friends who were welcoming and fun to be around. They were a lively group, and despite the age gap, I felt comfortable and accepted. Similarly, Alex fit in seamlessly with my friends and family. He had a charming personality that made everyone feel at ease. Our relationship was not just about the happy times though. We also supported each other through challenges, Alex was there for me when work got stressful, offering a listening ear and comforting words. I, in turn, helped him navigate the pressures of his studies and his part-time job. We were a team, facing the ups and downs of life together. Despite the seemingly perfect relationship, there were moments that hinted at underlying issues. Every now and then, Alex would casually bring up the idea of anal sex. He would phrase it in a way that seemed offhand, like it was just a passing thought. "Have you ever thought about trying something new in bed?" he would ask. Or, "I read this article about couples experimenting with anal, and it got me curious." Each time he brought it up, I felt a familiar anxiety creeping in. I would respond firmly but gently, reminding him that it was something I wasn't comfortable with. Alex would nod and drop the subject, but I could sense a hint of disappointment in his eyes. I started to worry that maybe I was not enough for him, that my reluctance to explore this particular aspect of our sexual relationship would drive a wedge between us. I tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the positive aspects of our relationship. However, the more Alex brought it up, the harder it became to ignore the nagging feeling that this issue was not going to disappear on its own. The turning point came one evening after another round of questions about trying anal sex. I could see that Alex was genuinely curious and not trying to pressure me, but it still triggered something deep inside me. I decided it was time to tell him the truth about my past, something I had kept buried for so long. We sat on the couch, and I took his hand in mine. I had a traumatic experience in my past that made the idea of anal sex extremely uncomfortable for me. I had been sexually assaulted by an ex-boyfriend when I was 17, an experience that left deep emotional scars. It was something I rarely talked about, and I certainly hadn't shared it with Alex yet. I took a deep breath and told Alex that I was uncomfortable with the idea of anal sex. I won't go into too much detail about my past, but I'll make it clear that it's been a difficult line for me. Alex seemed to understand and assured me that he respected my feelings and that it wasn't a big deal to him. He said that our relationship and my comfort were far more important than any sexual act. Alex pulled me into a tight embrace. "Emily, I'm so sorry you went through that," he said softly. "I had no idea. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. I promise I'll never bring it up again." For a while, after I had shared my traumatic past with Alex, he seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He promised not to bring up the topic of anal sex again, and for a few months, he kept that promise. Our relationship continued to flourish during this time. We went on romantic getaways, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and deepened our emotional connection. It felt like we had moved past a major hurdle, and I started to believe that we could build a future together without this issue hanging over us. However, as time went on, I noticed subtle signs that the topic was creeping back into our relationship. It started with small comments and jokes, often made in a light-hearted tone. At first, I brushed them off, thinking that he was just being playful. But the more frequent these comments became, the more uneasy I felt. I began to sense that Alex's curiosity and desire for anal sex had not truly been put to rest. One evening as we were relaxing on the couch after dinner, Alex brought up the topic again, this time more directly. "Emily, I've been thinking about something," he said, his tone serious. "I know we've talked about this before, but I wanted to bring it up again. Can we discuss the idea of trying anal sex?" My heart sank, and I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I had hoped that this issue was behind us, but clearly, it wasn't. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Alex, we've been through this. You know how I feel about it, and why it's such a difficult thing for me." He nodded, looking thoughtful. "I know, and I respect that. But I want to explain why it's important to me. It's not about the physical act itself or sexual pleasure. For me, it's more of a submissive thing." I was confused. "Submissive? What do you mean by that?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's about the dynamic it creates. I like the idea of you giving yourself up to me, of trusting me completely. It's a form of intimacy that goes beyond physical pleasure. It's about the connection and the trust involved." I tried to understand his perspective, but it was difficult. "So, you're saying it's not about the act itself, but what it represents to you?" He nodded again. "Exactly. I don't need it for sexual satisfaction. I love you and our sex life is great. But there's something about the submissive aspect that really appeals to me. It makes me feel closer to you in a different way." I appreciated his honesty, but it didn't make me feel any better about the situation. "Alex, I understand that you have your reasons, but this is a boundary that I need you to respect. It's tied to a very traumatic experience for me, and it's not something I can just get over." He reached out and took my hand, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Emily, I don't want you to think that this changes how I feel about you. I love you just the way you are, and this doesn't make me like you any less. But it's something I really want to explore with you because I believe it could bring us closer in a unique way. I sighed, feeling torn. On one hand, I wanted to honor his desires and be open to his needs. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the deep discomfort and fear that the idea of anal sex brought up for me. Alex, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, but it's hard. This is a deeply sensitive issue for me, and I need you to respect that. He squeezed my hand gently. I do respect it, Emily. I really do. But I also want us to be able to talk about our desires and needs openly. I promise I won't pressure you, and if it's something you can never do, I'll accept that. But I wanted you to know why it's important to me. His words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I appreciated his honesty, and his attempt to communicate his feelings, but it didn't change the fact that this was a hard boundary for me. I needed time to process what he had said and to figure out how we could move forward from here. The tension continued to build over the next few weeks. I tried to push my worries aside and focus on the positive aspects of our relationship, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Then, one evening, I discovered something that shattered my fragile sense of peace. As I settled onto the couch, Alex's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He had left it behind in his rush to catch his flight earlier that day. I glanced at the screen and saw a notification from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unlocked his phone to see what it was. What I found shocked and hurt me to my core. There were several videos, all sent from his ex-girlfriend, and they were explicit. In these videos, she was performing anal sex with various sex toys. My heart sank as I scrolled through the messages that accompanied the videos. They were from the early stages of Alex and I talking, before we had officially started dating. He had been asking her to do these things over text, and she had complied, sending him these graphic videos. I felt a rush of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion, and deep sadness. Why had Alex kept these videos? Why had he even asked for them in the first place? I couldn't comprehend what this meant for our relationship. The man I thought I knew and trusted had kept a significant part of his past hidden from me, and it felt like a punch to the gut. When Alex returned from his trip, I confronted him immediately. I showed him his phone and the videos. What is this, Alex? Why do you have these videos from your ex-girlfriend? And why were you asking her to do these things? Alex looked taken aback, his face paling as he realized what I had found. He took a deep breath and sat down, clearly trying to find the right words. Emily, I can explain. Those videos were sent to me after we had broken up. It was before we were together, and I never thought you'd find out about them. I felt a surge of anger. That's not the point, Alex. Why did you ask her to do these things? What does this mean for us? How am I supposed to trust you now? He looked down at his hands, guilt etched across his face. I asked her because, I don't know, it made me feel powerful. It's messed up, I know. I wanted to degrade her, to feel like I had some control. But it has nothing to do with you, Emily. I don't want to degrade you. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. How am I supposed to believe that, Alex? You've been pressuring me to do anal sex for months and now I find out you were doing this with your ex. It makes me feel like I'm not enough for you. Like I'll never be able to make you happy because I can't give you what she did. He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. Emily. Please. You are enough for me. More than enough. I love you and this doesn't change that. I kept those videos out of stupidity and selfishness, not because I want to degrade you or compare you to her. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and despair. I don't know if I can get past this, Alex. It's not just about the videos, it's about everything. The pressure you've been putting on me. The way you've made me feel like I'm not good enough. I don't want to be unhappy in our sex life, but I can't do something that brings back so much trauma for me. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Emily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I promise I'll never bring up anal sex again. I'll delete the videos, block her number, do whatever it takes to make this right. Just please, don't let this ruin us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. Alex, it's going to take a lot more than that to fix this. I need time to process everything and figure out if I can still trust you. Right now, I just need some space. He nodded, his expression one of profound regret. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. As I walked away, I felt a heavy weight in my chest. This discovery had shattered my sense of security in our relationship, and I didn't know if it could be repaired. I loved Alex, but the pain and betrayal I felt were overwhelming. I needed to figure out what this meant for us and whether we could move forward together. In the days following my discovery of the explicit videos, I was in a state of emotional turmoil. I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster, with waves of anger, sadness, confusion, and betrayal crashing over me at unexpected moments. The pain was almost physical, and my mind was constantly racing, trying to make sense of everything. I couldn't believe that the man I loved and trusted had kept something so significant from me. Feeling overwhelmed and unable to process everything on my own, I decided to reach out to a few close friends. I needed their support and perspective to help me navigate this difficult time. I invited my best friend Lisa over for coffee, knowing she would provide a listening ear and honest advice. As we sat on my couch, I poured out the entire story, from discovering the videos to Alex's explanation. Lisa listened intently, her face reflecting a mix of shock and sympathy. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "Emily, I can't believe he did that. I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you need to remember that you're strong, and you deserve someone who respects you completely." Her words were comforting, but they also highlighted the gravity of the situation. I felt a lump in my throat as I realized just how much my trust in Alex had been shattered. Lisa reminded me of the good times Alex and I had shared, the moments when he had been loving and supportive. She acknowledged that while Alex had made a serious mistake, he wasn't entirely defined by it. This was comforting yet confusing. How could I reconcile these two versions of him? As I continued to process everything, I found it incredibly difficult to reconcile the loving, caring man I knew with the one who had kept explicit videos of his ex-girlfriend. The contrast was stark and jarring. On one hand, Alex had been a source of comfort and joy in my life. He had been supportive during tough times, made me laugh when I needed it most, and had shown me love in ways I hadn't experienced before. On the other hand, the betrayal I felt from his actions was undeniable and deeply painful. I spent countless hours reflecting on our relationship, replaying memories in my mind, and analyzing every aspect of our time together. I thought about the early days when we had first met and the connection we had felt. I remembered the adventures we had shared, the intimate moments, and the dreams we had for our future. All of this made it even harder to come to terms with the current situation. One of the most troubling realizations was that while I still loved Alex, my respect for him had been severely damaged. Love and respect are both crucial components of a healthy relationship, and losing respect for someone you love creates a deep and unsettling conflict. I felt a profound sense of loss, as if the foundation of our relationship had been cracked, and I wasn't sure if it could be repaired. I found myself questioning everything. Could I ever fully trust Alex again? Would I always feel insecure and inadequate because of his past actions? How could we move forward when such a significant part of our relationship had been tainted by betrayal? These questions haunted me day and night, and I knew that I needed to find some clarity. Despite the pressures and expectations to reunite our family, I refused to leave my girlfriend and start over with my estranged wife. My name is Alex, and I am at a crossroads in my life, torn between the past and the present, between duty and desire. This is the story of my struggle to decide whether to stay with my amazing girlfriend, or to reconcile with my estranged wife for the sake of our family. My wife, Emma, and I had been separated for 3 years. Before that, we had spent a decade together, 9 of those years as a married couple. Our relationship was once the epitome of blissful love, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the deep comforting knowledge that we were each other's everything. I loved Emma very deeply, and for a long time, I believed she was my soulmate. We had 2 beautiful children together, now aged 12 and 10, who were the center of our world. Our family was my pride and joy, and for a while, it felt like nothing could ever come between us. I can still vividly remember the first time I laid eyes on Emma. It was a sunny afternoon in the park, and she was sitting on a bench reading a book. There was something about her that drew me in immediately. Maybe it was the way her hair caught the sunlight or the serene expression on her face as she lost herself in her book. I mustered up the courage to approach her, and to my delight, she looked up and smiled. That moment marked the beginning of our journey together. We spent hours talking, sharing our hopes and dreams, and finding that we had so much in common. Our connection was instantaneous and electric. We dated for a couple of years, and each day brought us closer together. We complemented each other in every way, balancing out each other's strengths and weaknesses. When I proposed, it was under a sky full of stars, and the look of joy on her face when she said yes, is something I will never forget. Our wedding was a beautiful celebration of our love, surrounded by family and friends who all believed, as we did, that we were perfect for each other. The first few years of our marriage were idyllic. We traveled, explored new places, and built a home filled with love and laughter. We talked about our future, our dreams of starting a family, and growing old together. When our first child was born, it was one of the happiest days of my life. Holding our baby in my arms, I felt a surge of love and responsibility. Emma was an incredible mother from the very beginning. She was nurturing, patient, and devoted. Our bond seemed to grow even stronger as we navigated the challenges and joys of parenthood together. 2 years later, our second child was born, completing our family. The house was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, and our hearts were full. However, things began to change after the birth of our second child. The intimacy that once flowed so naturally between us started to wane. Initially, I attributed it to the exhaustion and demands of raising young children. But as time went on, it became clear that this was not a temporary phase. It became something I had to beg for, a painful reminder that our connection was fraying at the edges. Emma never initiated it, and I faced rejection 99% of the time. At first I would bring it up gently, hoping we could address the issue together. I would choose moments when we were relaxed and alone, away from the chaos of daily life. Emma, I would say. I miss the way we used to be. I miss being close to you. She would listen, but her responses were always the same. She would accuse me of nagging her, telling me that I was making a big deal out of nothing. Each time she brushed off my concerns, a small piece of my heart broke. I tried different approaches, thinking that maybe if I did things differently, she would understand how important this was to me. I planned romantic dinners, surprised her with flowers, and even suggested weekends away from the kids. But nothing seemed to make a difference. The more I tried to communicate my feelings, the more distant she became. The turning point came one evening when we were watching a movie together. I reached out to hold her hand, and she pulled away, muttering something about being tired. I felt a surge of frustration and sadness. I turned off the TV and looked at her, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma, we need to talk about this. I can't keep feeling like this. She sighed, clearly exasperated. Alex, we have our children now. Isn't that enough? Why do you keep pushing this? Her words stung more than I cared to admit. Because it's important, Emma. We can't just ignore this part of our relationship. It's not just about sex. It's about feeling connected, feeling wanted. She rolled her eyes, and I could see the walls going up again. I'm happy, Alex. Why can't you be happy too? Why do you have to make everything so complicated? I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me. It was clear that we were on completely different wavelengths. I felt lonely and rejected, while she seemed perfectly content with the status quo. I realized that this wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about a deeper emotional disconnect that I didn't know how to bridge. The following weeks were a blur of tension and unspoken words. I found myself withdrawing, not knowing how to reach her anymore. I suggested we go to marriage counseling, hoping that a neutral third party could help us navigate these troubled waters. She reluctantly agreed, but it was clear she wasn't invested in the process. During one of our sessions, the therapist asked Emma why she thought we were there. She hesitated for a moment before responding. Alex is unhappy with our sex life. He thinks it's a big problem, but I don't see it that way. I felt a lump form in my throat as I listened to her. The therapist gently probed, asking her to elaborate. That's when Emma snapped, her voice filled with frustration. We have our children now, so what is the point of sex? The room fell silent. The therapist looked taken aback, and I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Emma's words echoed in my mind, a cruel confirmation of my deepest fears. She quickly tried to backtrack, saying it was just a joke because she felt cornered. But the damage was done. Her statement hung in the air, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened up between us. After that session, Emma made a brief effort to disprove her statement by paying more attention to me. She would initiate conversations, make an effort to be physically affectionate, but it all felt forced and temporary. Within a week she reverted to her old ways, and I decided to drop the subject altogether. I thought that when she was ready, she would come to me. But she never did. 8 years passed in this emotional limbo. Our physical relationship never recovered, and the emotional distance between us grew wider. I found solace in focusing on our children and my work, but the void in my heart remained. A year before our separation, I reached a breaking point. I told Emma that I was unhappy and needed things to change. I suggested another round of marriage counseling, along with sex therapy, hoping against hope that we could find a way back to each other. But she was dismissive, insisting that she was content and couldn't understand why I wasn't. It was then that I knew I had to leave, not because I didn't love her, but because staying would mean losing myself. The decision to leave was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It took me a year to prepare, to put my affairs in order, and to find a place where I could live close enough to co-parent our children effectively. When I finally told Emma, she was shocked, but not surprised. The separation was amicable. We both wanted what was best for our children, even if it meant we couldn't be together. By then my love for Emma was still there, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of frustration and loneliness. It's often said that people leave when the love is gone, but for me, It was the love that made it so hard to leave. It took me a year to put my affairs in order, to gather the strength to tell Emma that I was leaving. I found a rental near our home so that we could co-parent more easily, hoping that the proximity would lessen the impact on our children. Adjusting to single life was both a challenge and a revelation. After a decade of marriage and 3 years of a strained separation, I found myself alone in a small rental not far from the house Emma and I had shared. The echoes of our past life together lingered in the empty rooms, and the silence was deafening. My children visited regularly, their laughter and presence providing brief respites from the loneliness that otherwise enveloped me. The first few months were the hardest. I struggled to adapt to the solitude, to the absence of familiar routines that had once defined my days. Mornings were especially difficult. I would wake up and instinctively reach for the empty space beside me, only to be met with the cold reminder that Emma was no longer there. The bed felt vast and uninviting, a stark contrast to the warmth and comfort I had once known. In an attempt to fill the void, I began to explore the world of casual relationships. I joined dating apps, attended social events, and tried to meet new people. These encounters were fleeting, often leaving me feeling more empty and disconnected than before. Each date was a reminder of what I had lost, and I found myself comparing every woman I met to Emma. No one seemed to measure up, and the superficiality of these interactions left me longing for something deeper, more meaningful. Just when I was beginning to lose hope, I met Lily. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party, a casual gathering that I had almost skipped. The moment I saw her, there was an instant connection. She had an infectious smile and a warmth that drew me in immediately. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine spark of excitement and possibility. Lily was unlike anyone I had ever met. She was kind, compassionate, and incredibly understanding. She listened without judgment, offering insights that often left me in awe of her wisdom. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally, as we spent more time together. Each date was filled with laughter and deep conversations that left me feeling invigorated and alive. She had a way of making me feel seen and valued, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. As the months passed, our connection deepened. We shared our hopes, dreams and fears, building a foundation of trust and mutual respect. Lily was a breath of fresh air, a beacon of light in the darkness that had surrounded me for so long. She encouraged me to be myself, to embrace my passions and pursue my dreams. With her I felt a sense of freedom and possibility that I had almost forgotten existed. Our relationship was not without its challenges. I had to navigate the complexities of co-parenting, balancing my time between my children and Lily. There were moments of guilt and doubt, but Lily was always patient and supportive. She understood the importance of my role as a father and never tried to compete with my children for my attention. Instead, she embraced them, welcoming them into her life with open arms. The joy and fulfillment I felt in my relationship with Lily were unlike anything I had ever experienced. With her, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of my failed marriage. She reignited my passion for life, encouraging me to pursue hobbies and interests that I had long abandoned. Together, we explored new places, tried new things, and created memories that filled my heart with happiness. Lily's love was a balm to my wounded soul. She showed me that it was possible to love and be loved in a way that was healthy and nurturing. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, open communication, and a deep understanding of each other's needs and desires. I no longer felt the need to beg for attention or validation. With Lily, everything felt effortless, natural, and right. One of the most profound moments in our relationship came during a quiet evening at her apartment. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sunset, when she turned to me and said, "Alex, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what someone else wants you to be." Her words struck a chord deep within me, and I realized that for the first time in years, I truly believed them. Lily had given me a gift that was priceless. The belief in my own worth and the courage to pursue my happiness. She had shown me that love could be a source of strength and joy, not just a source of pain and frustration. With her, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I had never known before. As our relationship continued to grow, I found myself envisioning a future with Lily. I could see us building a life together, filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. She had become my partner, my confidant, and my best friend. The thought of losing her was unbearable, and I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. In comparison to my previous marriage, my relationship with Lily was a revelation. The joy and fulfillment I felt with her were a stark contrast to the years of emotional turmoil and disconnection I had experienced with Emma. With Lily, I felt whole, complete, and truly happy. She had brought me back to life, showing me that it was possible to love and be loved in a way that was healthy and enriching. It was a typical Saturday afternoon when the phone rang. I was in the middle of organizing my apartment, a task I had been putting off for weeks. The ringtone cut through the quiet, and I glanced at the caller ID. It was my mother. I answered, expecting a casual chat about her latest gardening project or a new recipe she had tried. "Alex," she said, her voice unusually serious. "I need you to come over. We need to talk." "Is everything okay?" I asked, my heart rate quickening. "Just come over," she insisted. "It's important." I agreed and hung up, my mind racing with possibilities. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. As I drove to my mother's house, I couldn't help but think about the past few years and how much my life had changed since the separation from Emma. Little did I know this visit would bring a new twist to my already complicated life. When I arrived, my mother was waiting for me at the door. Her expression was a mix of concern and determination. She ushered me into the living room, where, to my surprise, Emma was sitting on the couch. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, looking from my mother to Emma and back again. My mother motioned for me to sit down. "Alex, Emma and I have been talking. She wants to discuss something very important with you." Emma looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few months. I realize now how much I've taken you for granted and how much I've hurt you. I want us to try again. I want to reconcile." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. This was the last thing I had expected. For 3 years, we had lived separate lives, barely interacting beyond the necessary communication about our children. Now, she was asking to mend the broken pieces of our marriage. Emma continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I know I made mistakes, and I'm truly sorry. I've been seeing a therapist, working on myself, and I've realized that I can't let go of what we had. I miss you, Alex. I miss our family. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but it also brought back a flood of painful memories. I remembered all the times I had tried to reach out to her, to bridge the gap that had grown between us, only to be met with indifference or outright rejection. Could I trust her words now? Could I believe that she had truly changed? My mother chimed in, her voice gentle but firm. "Alex, I know this is a lot to take in, but think about the girls. They need their family together. You and Emma owe it to them to at least try." Her words cut deep. I had always put my daughters first, and the thought of giving them a united family was tempting. But I couldn't ignore the fact that it wasn't just about them. My happiness mattered too, and I had found that with Lily. "I need some time to think," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm here, ready to do whatever it takes." I left my mother's house that day with a heavy heart, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The drive home felt longer than usual, each mile filled with doubts and questions. When I finally walked through the door of my apartment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was my sanctuary, a place where I could think clearly, and process everything that had just happened. That evening, I told Lily everything. We sat on the couch, her hand in mine, as I recounted the events of the day. She listened quietly, her face a mask of calm concern. When I finished, she squeezed my hand gently. "You need to do what feels right for you and your daughters, Alex," she said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Her words were a balm to my troubled mind, but they didn't make the decision any easier. The next few days were filled with sleepless nights and endless contemplation. I replayed Emma's words over and over in my head, trying to discern if there was truth in them or if they were just a desperate attempt to cling to the past. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, memories of my marriage with Emma flooded back. I remembered the good times, the laughter, and the dreams we had shared. But I also remembered the pain, the rejection, and the feeling of being unloved and unwanted. I had to be honest with myself. Could I go back to that life? Could I risk opening those old wounds again? My mother called me frequently during this time, her voice always filled with concern. "Alex, have you thought about what Emma said? I know it's a lot to ask, but please consider it. For the girls." Her pleas weighed heavily on me. I knew she meant well, but she didn't fully understand the depth of the pain that had driven me to leave in the first place. It wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about feeling valued, respected, and loved. And for a long time, I hadn't felt any of those things with Emma. I spent the next few days reflecting on my life, my children, and my future. I thought about Lily and the happiness she had brought into my life. I thought about Emma and the history we shared, the good and the bad. And most importantly, I thought about my daughters and what was best for them. Finally, I reached a decision. I called Emma and asked her to meet me at a local park where we could talk privately. As we sat on a bench overlooking a serene pond, I took a deep breath and began to speak. Emma, I've thought a lot about what you said. I appreciate your willingness to try and fix things, and I believe that you're sincere. But I need you to understand that it's not just about whether we can make our marriage work. It's about whether we can both be truly happy in that marriage. Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on mine. I understand, Alex. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry for that. I just want to try, for us and for the girls. I sighed, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. Emma. I found happiness with Lily. She makes me feel loved and valued in a way I haven't felt in a long time. I can't just walk away from that. But I also can't ignore the fact that our daughters deserve a stable, loving environment. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I think the best thing we can do is to co-parent as effectively as possible. We can work together to give the girls the support and love they need, even if we're not together as a couple. I believe that's the best way forward for all of us. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, and she nodded slowly. I understand, Alex. I just want what's best for the girls. If this is what you think is best, then I'll support it. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with a mix of sadness and relief. We both knew that we were making the right decision, even if it wasn't the one we had once hoped for. As I walked away from the park that day, I felt a sense of closure. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that I had made the right choice for myself and my children. I returned home to Lily, ready to build a future filled with love, happiness, and the promise of new beginnings. After my wife passed away, I entrusted all our assets to our child. This decision infuriated my next wife. My name is Nathan Harper. My life changed irreversibly 3 years ago when my beloved wife Emma passed away unexpectedly. The shock of her death still haunts me, a grim reminder of how quickly and tragically life can alter. We had been together for 20 beautiful years, building a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Emma was my anchor, my confidant, and the mother of our daughter, Lily. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. Emma was a vibrant, loving woman with an infectious zest for life. She was dedicated to her career as a pediatrician, always putting her heart into helping children. Her passion extended to our home, where she created a nurturing environment for Lily and me. We had met in college, and from the moment we locked eyes, I knew she was the one. We shared countless memories: our first home, the birth of Lily, family vacations, and quiet moments of contentment. Emma had a unique ability to make every day feel special. The day Emma died is etched into my memory with painful clarity, a series of moments that I often replay, wishing I could somehow alter the course of events. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. Emma had just finished her shift at the pediatric clinic, a place where she poured her heart and soul into caring for children. She called me before leaving, her voice tired but cheerful as she spoke about a particularly challenging case she had handled that day. "I'll be home soon," she said. "Let's have dinner together and maybe watch that movie we've been putting off." I had no reason to think that this would be our last conversation. The accident happened just a few miles from our home. Emma was driving along the familiar route, a stretch of road she had traveled countless times. According to the police report, a large truck had veered out of its lane, crossing the median and colliding head-on with Emma's car. The impact was devastating. The truck driver later revealed that he had fallen asleep at the wheel, a tragic lapse that had catastrophic consequences. I received the call around 5:30 p.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in me sensed that it wasn't going to be good news. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, but the words they spoke shattered my world. "Mr. Anderson, this is Officer Blake from the County Police Department. Your wife, Emma Anderson, has been in a severe car accident. I'm afraid she didn't survive the impact." For a moment, everything around me stopped. The air seemed to thicken, and I couldn't breathe. I heard the officer's voice continuing, explaining the details and asking if there was someone I could call to be with me. But I was numb, my mind refusing to process the reality of what I was hearing. Emma, my Emma, was gone. Just like that, in an instant, our lives were irrevocably changed. I managed to call a neighbor, a close friend who rushed over to be with me. Together, we went to the hospital to identify her body. Seeing Emma there, lifeless and cold, was the most excruciating experience of my life. She looked so peaceful, as if she were merely sleeping, but the reality was far more brutal. The vibrant, loving woman who had been my partner for 20 years was no more. Breaking the news to Lily was a task I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. She had been at a friend's house, studying for an upcoming exam. I remember driving over, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. When she saw me, she knew something was wrong. "Dad, what's happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. I took her hands in mine, trying to steady my voice. "Lily, there's been an accident," I began, my voice breaking. "Mom didn't make it. She's gone." The look of disbelief and anguish on her face will haunt me forever. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, I felt utterly helpless, unable to protect my daughter from the profound pain that had just enveloped our lives. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. We had to arrange the funeral, a task that seemed impossible in our state of mourning. Friends and family came to offer their condolences, but nothing could ease the ache in our hearts. Emma had been the glue that held us together, and without her, everything felt fractured. Lily struggled immensely. At 15 she was on the cusp of adulthood, but losing her mother thrust her into a world of sorrow and confusion that no teenager should have to navigate. She had been so close to Emma, they shared a bond that was beautiful to witness. Now she was left grappling with an overwhelming sense of loss. She threw herself into her studies, perhaps as a way to keep her mind occupied, but I could see the pain in her eyes, the moments when the weight of her grief would come crashing down. As for me, I was adrift in a sea of sorrow. Emma had been my rock, my confidant, the person I turned to in times of trouble. Without her, I felt unmoored, struggling to find my footing in a world that no longer made sense. The nights were the hardest, lying awake in our bed, the emptiness beside me a constant reminder of what I had lost. Every corner of our home held memories of Emma, from the photos on the walls to the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. People often say that time heals all wounds, but in those early days, I couldn't see how that was possible. The pain was too raw, too all-encompassing. My only solace was in being there for Lily, trying to support her as best as I could. We leaned on each other, our shared grief a bond that both united and tore us apart. Emma and I had often talked about our future and what we wanted for Lily. Although we hadn't formalized it in a will, it was clear to me that Emma intended for Lily to inherit everything we had worked so hard to build. Emma's own parents had left her everything, and she always believed in the importance of leaving a legacy for our daughter. So, when Emma passed away without a will, the legal proceedings divided everything equally between Lily and me. But in my heart, I knew Emma's true wishes. Lily and I supported each other through those dark days, leaning on each other as we tried to find a new normal. Despite her youth, Lily displayed remarkable resilience and strength. She threw herself into her studies and extracurricular activities, perhaps as a way to cope with her grief. I tried to be there for her, to fill the void left by Emma as best as I could. But I knew I could never replace her mother. About a year and a half ago, I met someone new. Jessica. Our meeting was unexpected, one of those serendipitous moments that life occasionally offers. I was at a charity event, something I had thrown myself into as a way to give back and stay busy. The event was a fundraiser for a local children's hospital, an institution close to my heart because of Emma's work as a pediatrician. I found solace in helping others, trying to channel my grief into something positive. The venue was bustling with activity. Volunteers were setting up tables, arranging decorations, and preparing for the evening's festivities. As I navigated through the crowd, my eyes caught sight of a woman who seemed to be at the center of the action, effortlessly organizing the chaos around her. She was warm, engaging, and had a certain charisma that drew people in. Her laughter rang out, a melodious sound that seemed to cut through the noise and reach something deep within me. We ended up at the same table, working on a last-minute decoration task. Our conversation started casually, but soon, we were talking about everything. From our favorite books to the challenges of parenting teenagers. There was an instant connection, a feeling that I hadn't experienced since Emma. Before I knew it, hours had passed. The event came to an end, and as people started to leave, Jessica and I exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. Jessica and I started seeing each other regularly. It felt strange at first, to be with someone new after so many years with Emma. There was a sense of guilt, as if moving on meant betraying Emma's memory. But Jessica had a way of making me feel alive again. She brought a sense of hope and possibility back into my life. Her presence was like a gentle breeze that swept away the lingering shadows of grief. Our relationship developed quickly. We found that we had many common interests, an appreciation for classic literature, a love of hiking, and a shared passion for volunteering. Our personalities complemented each other well. Jessica was outgoing and sociable, while I was more reserved and introspective. Her energy balanced my calm, and together, we found a harmonious rhythm. Jessica was understanding and compassionate, especially when it came to my grief over Emma. She never pressured me to move faster than I was ready for, and she listened patiently when I needed to talk about my late wife. Her empathy was a balm to my wounded heart. She understood that Emma would always be a part of my life, and she respected that, never trying to replace her but rather carving out her own unique place in my heart. Jessica had a 17-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, Emily, who was vibrant and full of life. The four of us, Jessica, her daughter, Lily and I, began spending time together as a blended family. Our first outings were simple: picnics in the park, movie nights at home, and weekend hikes. There were initial awkward moments as we all adjusted to the new dynamics, but slowly, bonds began to form. Lily, still grappling with her own grief, found a kindred spirit in Emily. They were close in age and shared similar interests, from music to fashion. It was heartwarming to see them grow closer, supporting each other through the challenges of adolescence. Jessica and I marveled at how well our daughters got along, often finding them lost in conversation or planning their next adventure together. After a year of dating, I proposed to Jessica. It felt right, like a new chapter that I was ready to embrace. The proposal was a simple, intimate affair. I took her to the botanical garden where we had our first official date. As we walked through the blooming flowers, I knelt down on one knee and asked her to marry me. Jessica's eyes filled with tears of joy, and she said yes, her smile radiant under the evening sky. Jessica was thrilled, and we started making plans for our future together. We discussed everything: where we would live, how we would blend our families, and our hopes for the future. We envisioned a home filled with love and laughter, where our daughters could thrive and where we could build new memories together. It was a future that, for the first time in a long while, seemed bright and full of promise. As our relationship grew more serious, Jessica and I began to discuss our future in more detail. Inevitably, the conversation turned to finances and inheritance. Jessica was under the impression that everything I had, including what I inherited from Emma, would be part of our shared future. She envisioned a life where our resources were pooled together to provide for both her daughter, Emily, and our potential future children. This assumption, however, led to a significant point of contention between us. Before getting engaged, I had made a crucial decision that I knew would impact our future together. I had transferred everything that I inherited from Emma to Lily. This decision was rooted in a deep sense of duty and commitment to honor Emma's wishes. Although Emma had not left a formal will, our conversations over the years made her intentions clear to me. Emma was a meticulous planner and a dedicated mother. We often talked about our hopes and dreams for Lily's future. Emma was particularly passionate about ensuring that Lily would have the means to pursue her dreams without financial burden. She wanted Lily to have access to the best education, opportunities to travel, and the security to make choices based on passion rather than necessity. Emma's parents had left her everything, and she always intended to follow that tradition, believing it was the best way to secure Lily's future. The absence of a will was a tragic oversight, a consequence of Emma's sudden and untimely death. Despite this, I felt a moral obligation to act on what I knew to be her wishes. Transferring the assets to Lily was my way of fulfilling Emma's vision and ensuring that her hard work and sacrifices directly benefited our daughter. This decision was not made lightly. I spent countless nights reflecting on the potential repercussions and how it might affect my burgeoning relationship with Jessica. I knew that blending our families was going to be complex, and financial matters often complicate such situations even further. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was the right thing to do. Emma had dedicated so much of her life to building a secure future for Lily, and it was my responsibility to see that through. The revelation came on an otherwise quiet evening. Jessica and I were sitting in the living room, enjoying a rare moment of peace. We had been discussing wedding plans and the logistics of blending our families. Amidst the conversation, Jessica brought up the topic of finances, eager to understand how we would manage our resources moving forward. "I think it's important that we start discussing our financial future together," Jessica said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We should talk about combining our assets and making sure that Emily and Lily are both taken care of equally." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. I had been dreading this conversation, knowing it would inevitably lead to the difficult subject of the asset transfer. I took a deep breath, deciding that honesty was the only way forward. "Jessica, there's something you need to know," I began, my voice steady but tinged with apprehension. "Before we got engaged, I transferred everything I inherited from Emma to Lily. I felt it was the right thing to do, given Emma's wishes." Jessica's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean you transferred everything to Lily?" she asked, her tone sharp. "How much are we talking about?" I explained the details: the house, the savings, the investments. Everything that Emma and I had worked for, I had ensured would go to our daughter. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawn on Jessica, her eyes narrowing and her lips pressing into a thin line. "So, you're saying that everything Emma left you is now in Lily's name?" she asked, her voice rising. "How could you make such a huge decision without discussing it with me first?" "I did it because it's what Emma would have wanted," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "She always intended for Lily to inherit everything. I felt it was my duty to honor her wishes." Jessica stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "And what about our future? What about Emily? Did you even consider us?" She felt blindsided and betrayed, believing that I had acted unilaterally without considering our shared future. Her anger and disappointment were palpable. Jessica argued that our marriage should mean sharing everything, including financial assets, and that by transferring everything to Lily, I was excluding her and Emily from our future plans. I tried to explain my reasoning to Jessica, hoping she would understand the depth of my commitment to honoring Emma's legacy. I told her about the conversations Emma and I had, the dreams we had for Lily, and the profound responsibility I felt to uphold those dreams. I emphasized that this was not a reflection of my feelings for Jessica or her daughter, but rather a fulfillment of a promise I made to Emma, even if that promise was never formally documented. Jessica's perspective was different. She saw the transfer as a barrier to our future, a sign that I was not fully committed to our new family. She felt that her daughter and any future children we might have were being unfairly excluded from resources that could benefit everyone. Her arguments were passionate and heartfelt, underscoring her desire to build a life together based on mutual support and shared responsibilities. The situation put me in a difficult position. On one hand, I understood Jessica's point of view. She wanted to ensure that our blended family operated as a cohesive unit, with no distinctions between my assets and our assets. On the other hand, my obligation to Emma's memory and Lily's future weighed heavily on my heart. Emma had been my partner in every sense of the word, and her wishes were a guiding force in my decision-making process. I also considered the implications of merging everything too quickly. Jessica and Emily were relatively new additions to our lives, and while my feelings for them were genuine and strong, the circumstances of the inheritance were unique. Emma's contributions were significant, and I felt it was premature to merge those assets without ensuring that Lily's future was secure. This was not just about money, it was about respecting the legacy of a woman who had given so much to her family. The decision to give everything to Lily was also about fairness. Lily had lost her mother, and no amount of money could ever compensate for that loss. But ensuring she had the financial stability to pursue her dreams, go to college, and start her adult life with a safety net was something I could do for her. It was my way of trying to make things right in a situation where so much had gone wrong. Navigating this complex situation has been challenging. Balancing my love for Jessica, and my commitment to honoring Emma's legacy is a delicate act. I want to build a future with Jessica, but not at the expense of disregarding what Emma and I had envisioned for our daughter. This tension has forced me to reflect deeply on my values, responsibilities, and the kind of legacy I want to leave behind for both Lily and any future family. As I stand at this crossroads, I am determined to find a solution that respects both my past with Emma, and my future with Jessica. It's not an easy path, but I believe that with understanding, compassion, and clear communication, we can navigate through this and find a way forward that honors everyone involved.